Chapter 239. The castle itself occupied a large area, and the designer seemed to have deliberately designed the low-level passages to be particularly complicated. If they wanted to go to the stairwell from the blacksmith area, they had to go through a winding passage that was hundreds of meters long. After going up to the second floor, they had to go to the central area of the second floor and use the newly obtained blacksmith key to open the only staircase stone door that led to the third floor. Only then could they reach the upper level of the castle. The probability of encountering obstacles during the journey was relatively high, but they didn't expect to meet a team of trainee knights. A team of 3. All members had reached the seed breaking period. The points allocated to major professions have reached 5 points, not yet seed breaking. The leader was a crusader with a standard figure, equipped with blood-red armor, and exuding a heavy murderous aura. The eyes exposed through the gap of the helmet were also blood-red. Just by looking at each other, Han Dong and Wenli felt very uncomfortable. Countless evil creatures and monsters had died in the hands of this person. Not only this person. The 2 teammates behind him were also not easy to deal with. One of the students who majored in library looked even weaker than Han Dong. The arm exposed outside the sleeve was as thin as firewood. In his hand was a staff with a skull as the core. His whole body exuded a murderous aura. The other person was dressed as a typical assassin, wearing a dark skull mask. From the hair draped over her shoulders, her gait and her figure, she should be a woman. This kind of encounter made Wenli a little scared, and she leaned sideways behind Han Dong. The Crusader leader asked kindly, "Aren't you the specially selected newcomers? Why are you here?" "Greetings, senior brothers and sisters. We just entered the castle area and encountered a sneak attack from the cadre level. We were accidentally separated from the rest of the team. I have been running in the passage with her, and I can't find the direction at all. Can you take the 2 of us? We just need to follow you out of the castle." Han Dong pretended to be frightened and lost in the passage in advance. With such a question, it was not strange at all. "We won't leave, and we will go to a more dangerous area. We don't have time to take you. You go down this path by yourself. When you encounter a fork, turn left. The door corresponding to the third fork will lead to the front hall area." "Thank you. There should be no threat in this passage, right?" "Not at the moment, but I'm not sure after a while." "Good. Thank you, senior." Han Dong held Wenli's hand tightly and pretended to be in a hurry, but at the same time, he was trembling in fear. He continued to move forward, and separated from the team as quickly as possible. Based on Han Dong's observation, Fang Qiu's expression changed drastically. The standards of these 3 people were very high, even higher than the team of the meat shield warrior Johnny. Furthermore, the 3 of them were not righteous knights. Once this group of people came looking for trouble, Han Dong's plan would be disrupted. Not long after the Han Dong duel left, the boy who looked like a necromancer used his magic staff to create a skull wrapped in netherworld ghost flames. 2 gloomy eyeballs gradually grew out of the skull's eye socket. Similar to the vision provided by the owner, it was a detection method. He tossed out the skull and immediately chased after them. The Blood Knight in the lead spoke softly. "You need to complete the regional mission to obtain the qualifications to enter the castle. This place was located at the back of the ancient castle and was quite far from the front hall. Even if they were separated due to the sneak attack, they wouldn't have come here. This group of newcomers doesn't seem to be simple." The necromancer apprentice from the library opened his mouth and spoke. "Among this group of newcomers, there is a junior who has a good relationship with the library's deputy director, Hera. His name is Demps Martin. It's a pity that I didn't get to meet him. Otherwise, I would have liked to have a good chat with this kind of genius." The 3 of them walked forward for a while and arrived at the blacksmith district. When they opened the door, they only saw the scattered apprentices, but they couldn't find the blacksmith's corpse. Almost at the same time, the necromancer apprentice frowned. Captain, the skull I released was discovered and destroyed by that kid who pretended to be a fool. According to their route, the front hall is very close to the front hall. The probability of going to the front hall is very small, so it should go to the second floor. This group of newcomers really isn't simple. We need to speed up a bit. If we meet this group of newcomers again, we need to spend some time chatting with them about the ancient castle. No problem, Captain. The necromancer apprentice had already sent out a free arm to collect bone materials from the blacksmith apprentices. Every extra corpse would increase the apprentice's fighting strength. So dangerous! Is this the elite team of third-year students? If they find out that I have the blacksmith key on me, things will become quite troublesome. I need to introduce this factor into the plan. If I meet them again in the ancient castle, I will definitely be targeted. Holding the skull that had been cut open, Han Dong frowned as he sensed the remaining aura of the dead souls inside. Meeting such a small team of knights would, to a certain extent, increase the overall difficulty of the operation, and variability would affect the whole plan. That was Blood Knight Lucius, Wunli said timidly. You know him? Yes. I've learned about the apprentice knights who entered the school with excellent grades. This Lucius is very famous. Like you, he entered the school as the best apprentice crusader, and the dean thought highly of him. It's rumored that the Scarlet Knights had already sent out a recruitment order to him in advance. Yes. Vice Captain, we must not clash with them. Let's avoid them as much as possible. It depends on the situation. Han Dong finally found the stairs to the second floor. He repeated the same trick. During the forging process, Han Dong also made some changes to the blacksmith. After passing through the corridor and reaching the second floor, he put on the blacksmith skin and completed the process with camouflage. As a blacksmith, a Trothu, they went straight to the central elevator. Along the way, they encountered all kinds of guards wandering in the area, as well as several special butlers who went in and out of the walls like ghosts. However, they could not see through the disguise. Clicked. The key was inserted into the stone door. Following the only staircase that only officers and family members were allowed to enter, they successfully arrived at the upper level of the ancient castle. The narrow passage in the lower level became spacious here. A red carpet was spread on the ground, and both sides of the passage were illuminated by luxurious candlesticks. There was also an eyeball device at the top that monitored the real-time situation in the passage. Han Dong was very interested in such an eyeball. It was necessary to find its main body. Maybe it could improve Han Dong's little magic eye. He found the door with a troth written on it and successfully sneaked into this private room. This place was no longer monitored by the eyeball. Wow! It's so hot! They hurriedly took off the thick and still warm blacksmith skin. Along the way, the two of them were sweating profusely from the heat. Fortunately, this blacksmith's bedroom was of a normal European style and not a scorching blacksmith's room design. There was also a large private bathroom for the two of them to use. Chapter 240. Based on the situation in the corridor of the upper zone, we should be the first team to arrive here. It's almost evening. Even if the other teams kill a family member and obtain the wiki. Without a map, they won't rashly enter the upper zone. The other teams will inevitably return to the town first and continue tomorrow. Our goal for today has been achieved. Let's rest in this room for the night. Tomorrow may be very tiring. Leaving aside the group of third-year students that they met halfway, the overall plan could be carried out smoothly thanks to the camouflage ability given by the faceless skull. First team? What about the captain and the others? Wunli was a bit confused. She didn't expect the progress to be so fast. The captain and the others will also leave. Only the two of us will stay in the castle for the night. Not only that, we will also take advantage of the map to be at the front, until the Grand Lord meets. Miss Wunli, please be mentally prepared. Okay. Wunli clenched her teeth and nodded slightly. looking around the blacksmith's bedroom. It was decorated in a European aristocratic style. The floor was covered with a luxurious wool carpet, and the wall was inlaid with candles. The 3-meter-wide bed took up a lot of space. At the same time, it was equipped with a separate bathroom. Apart from some decorations and books that believed in Satan, the room was not bad. Since she just came out of the blacksmith's skin, Won-Lee was completely wet. Naturally, the window couldn't be opened. Otherwise, her identity might be exposed. There was only one way to cool down. "Vice Captain, I'm going to take a shower first. Remember not to close the door." "Okay." Won-Lee's cheeks flushed red when she heard this. "Because we can't be sure if there's a mechanism in the bathroom. If something unexpected happens while you're taking a shower, it's easier to communicate with the door open. Then don't peek, I won't." Han Dong didn't have any other thoughts. He wasn't interested in this at all. Won-Lee held a set of loose pajamas in her hands. When she entered the bathroom, she leaned against the door and secretly peeked at the vice captain who was sitting at the head of the bed. She wanted to remind him again, but she swallowed it back down. Won-Lee had never been alone in a room with the opposite sex. Not to mention that she had to completely open the door while taking a shower. There was no privacy or sense of security. Vice Captain is different from the others. He definitely won't. The round bathtub was filled with cool well water. When Won-Lee took off her sweat-soaked singlet and leather pants, she would glance at the door from time to time. As soon as she put down her clothes, she immediately stepped into the bathtub and submerged her entire body into the cold well water. Wow, so comfortable! Won-Lee's eyes were glued to the door as she leaned against the side of the bathtub. As time passed, the discomfort gradually faded away, but Won-Lee had a very strange psychological change. Vice Captain is really amazing. It's like he can predict many things in advance. Everything is under his control. Speaking of which, the Vice Captain should like girls with thin arms and legs like Mia, right? A muscular girl like me shouldn't be too interested. Slowly, Won-Lee even looked forward to Han Dong suddenly appearing at the bathroom door. Won-Lee's cheeks flushed red when she suddenly realized the problem with her thoughts. She submerged her head into the pool and tried to calm herself down. Just like that, the shower ended. Won-Lee, who had changed into a set of loose linen pajamas, did not see the scene she had imagined. She walked out of the bathroom barefoot. Won-Lee found that the vice captain was still sitting at the head of the bed. His fingers were drawing on the wall as if he was silently making arrangements and calculations. "Vice Captain, I'm done showering." "Okay." Han Dong jumped out of his hall of thought and came up with 2 additional plans to deal with emergencies. However, when Han Dong turned his head to look at Won-Lee, who had just come out of the shower, he could not help but be surprised. Her wet, fiery red hair was draped over her shoulders, and her loose linen pajamas covered most of her muscles. In terms of appearance, Won-Lee was quite good. She was between cute and delicate. Of course, once her 8-pack abs were exposed, there would be a different feeling. Seeing Han Dong staring at her, Won-Lee bit her lower lip slightly and looked to the side. She was very embarrassed. While she was in a daze, Han Dong had already entered the bathroom. Splash! Hearing the sound of him entering the water, Won-Lee, who came back to her senses, actually had the idea of peeking at the vice captain taking a shower. "Wow. What are you thinking, seriously?" Won-Lee's face was red as she completely buried her body in the soft and huge bed. "That's right. How am I going to sleep tonight? There's only this one bed." Thinking of this, Won-Lee's blood rushed to her head again. Her brain could not think normally and her 2 legs kept kicking. "Won-Lee, ah!" As Han Dong, who had just finished showering, called out softly, Won-Lee, who was in an illusion, directly cried out. Then, she realized her problem and hurriedly covered her mouth. I'm sorry. It's fine. It's still early. I have something to ask you." "Vice Captain, please ask." Hearing that he was going to talk about serious matters, Won-Lee immediately threw away all the fantasies in her mind. Kneeling on the bed, she looked at the vice-captain with an obedient and serious face. Your body seems to be very special. Can you tell me a little about it? If it's inconvenient, it's fine if you don't say it. Wunli shook her head. It's not inconvenient. However, vice-captain, you must keep it a secret for me. After all, Master said that before I become an official knight, I can't tell anyone about the secrets of my body. Yes, I will keep it a secret. My body is related to my father, but I don't know who my father is. My earliest memory is in the blacksmith shop. I also grew up with Master. I have never seen my parents. Master also didn't let me ask. Even if I mention it, I will be beaten. Speaking of this, Wunli's eyes became slightly red. It seemed that talking about her parents was a taboo. Father? Yes. The body that has been strengthened through the destiny space has hereditary properties. Just like Captain Abel, he has the body of 100 beasts. I have inherited my father's muscle fibers. Since I was young, my strength has been far greater than others. Moreover, the density of the muscle fibers in the body can be continuously increased through various kinds of training. Working in the blacksmith shop is the best way to train. The high temperature can make the muscle cells active. All kinds of high-intensity forging work can make my body strengthen to the greatest extent. Currently, I can barely control the muscle fibers and make them gather in a certain area to increase the explosive power. When attacked, the fibers will automatically compress and form a high-density defensive layer to resist all kinds of damage. That's about it. In addition, the muscle fibers also seem to be able to store oxygen. My physical strength is also much better than the average person. Unlimited muscle fibers. No wonder your body is so powerful. The myoglobin in the slow muscle fibers combines with the oxygen released by the red blood cells and plays the role of storing oxygen. The cross-sectional area of the fast muscle fibers is wide and the density of the myofibrils is relatively high. It provides an instant explosive power. The density of your muscle fibers is probably 10 times that of a normal person or even higher. Wunli, who was sitting obediently on her knees, was completely dumbfounded by Han Dong's word. She tilted her head to one side, and the only thing missing was a question mark hanging above her head. Chapter 241. In the evening, Han Dong and Wunli each slept on one side of the 3-meter-wide soft bed. Even though they were completely separated by the bedding, Wunli still felt a little uncomfortable. Vice-Captain, are you asleep? Do you want me to sleep on the floor? If it weren't for the large bed occupying a large area of the bedroom and the corridor being squeezed together, Han Dong wouldn't have to sleep together with Wunli. After all, he could see that Miss Wunli rarely came into contact with the opposite sex. No, I just can't sleep. Can I talk to you, Vice-Captain? Vice-Captain. You must have worked very hard to reach such a level and capture 2 powerful summoned creatures, right? Master said that no one is born powerful. Every knight commander has his or her own hard work behind the scenes. Everyone seems to have a great dream and is willing to sacrifice their lives for human freedom. But I don't have such a dream, and I don't have enough awareness. It's just that Master gives me a certain amount of work every day, and I have to complete it. They say how beautiful the world outside the city is, but that's all in the past. I feel that it's not bad to spend the rest of my life in the holy city. Vice-Captain, do you have any wishes or ideals that motivate you? To live for myself. Isn't this reason enough? I'm a selfish person. I don't have any chivalry. If you want me to risk my life, I definitely won't do it. Pfft, Wunli burst out laughing. Usually, when she chatted with the apprentices in the blacksmith shop, they would all talk about their great dreams, such as joining the knight regiment and sacrificing everything for the holy city. It was the first time Wunli heard Han Dong's answer. Just as Wunli had some other thoughts in her mind, she tried to move her body closer to Han Dong, who was sleeping on the other side. Han Dong continued. Like I said, I don't have any chivalry. We will encounter more danger in the castle. If Miss Winley makes a serious mistake and falls into a desperate situation, I will only protect myself. I may not have time to save you. So, it's better for you to rest early and replenish your physical and mental strength. Wenli's heart trembled. She bit her lips and stopped leaning towards Han Dong. Her voice was slightly low as she said, "Okay. I'll be serious. I won't cause any trouble for the vice-captain. Good night." "Good night." Han Dong deliberately said such a straight answer. He didn't want the two of them to be too close. It was also because of this sentence that Wenli stopped letting her imagination run wild and quickly fell asleep. At first, I thought that Wenli was also in disguise. I didn't expect there to be such a person in this apocalyptic world. Seeing that Wenli was completely asleep, Han Dong slowly sat up. He had no intention of sleeping. If he really needed to rest, he would have returned to his residence after obtaining the key. There was a reason why he chose to stay in the castle. If he wanted to successfully steal the title deed, he couldn't waste a single second. Han Dong had to move alone from night to dawn. But because Wenli's character was somewhat timid, if she was left alone in the castle bedroom, she would inevitably be unable to sleep and would be on tenterhooks all night. Han Dong had to accompany her to sleep first, and then take the relevant actions alone. He had to ensure that Wenli was in her best state when he started the operation tomorrow. Otherwise, the last step of the plan would not be realized. Disguise Han Dong was not disguised as a blacksmith, but as a swollen doctor. He, who had an in-depth communication with the doctor, could achieve a high level of imitation in speech and action. Tonight's task was very simple. Obtain the method to go to the top floor of the castle. Squeak squeak, Han Dong's two legs were split into multiple tentacles under the camouflage effect. A wave of polluted air also overflowed, and he left the room with a huge swollen head. Well, I didn't expect. This way of moving is quite comfortable. For the first time, Han Dong experienced the wonderful feeling of moving tentacles, fast and fast. He thought that it would take some time to get used to it, but the current movement was as smooth as silk. The human body is flawed to begin with. Isn't turning into tentacles a kind of evolution? Before leaving the room, Han Dong deliberately left a letter for Wenli to avoid falling into a panic when she woke up in the middle of the night. As he wriggled along the upper zone's open red carpet corridor, some of the patrolling guards took the initiative to greet the doctor. According to the map's description, I can only go to the 4th floor through a restricted corridor. Only the Great Lord's family and his personal butler can pass through. It just so happens that this personal butler lives on the 3rd floor. Dong. Dong. Han Dong knocked on the wooden door that had the sign Housekeeper, Barbara Priestide hanging on it. Creak, the door opened by itself, and a very oily smell overflowed from inside. It felt as if Shifeng had stepped into an oil refinery. This butler is mainly responsible for the Great Lord's nutrition. Han Dong had already mentally prepared himself. "Doctor, why are you looking for me so late at night?" Who would have thought that the voice that came from the inner room was actually a soft female voice? Han Dong mimicked the way the professor spoke. "There's a problem with the supply of nutrients from the zombie factory, and I wish to discuss it with you. Furthermore, there are a large number of invaders at the graveyard area, and I urgently need some powerful nutrient. Come in." Han Dong pushed the door open. A strong oily smell assaulted his senses. This bedroom was 3 times bigger than the blacksmith's room, which showed that there was a difference in the status of the clan's cadres. There was only a small candlestick hanging from the ceiling of the huge bedroom, and the light in the room was dim. Squeak squeak squeak, sound of liquid squeezing, a kind of viscous oil constantly overflowed from the walls on both sides. Even the ground was covered with a thick layer of oil, which was in a semi-solidified state. It was very easy to slip on foot. Han Dong, who relied on his tentacles to move, was fine. Most importantly, The aura emanating from the depths of the room was stronger than that of the barber and blacksmith. As expected, he's not easy to deal with. He should be considered a high-level cadre. The big bed was empty. This nutritionist cum personal butler was making nutritional supplements in a separate study. When he wriggled to the door of the study, a strange scene appeared in front of Han Dong. The study was more like a nutritional oil refinery room. Some ghouls with good flesh would be sent here, and this nutritionist would be responsible for refining ghoul living oil that contained high nutritional value. A woman was using a candle to carefully bake the skin. Barbara, long time no see. Doctor, I'll be frank. Recently, the great lord's body has been deteriorating rapidly, and he needs a large amount of nutrient. Your factory can't have any problems. Otherwise, the great lord may use you to refine oil. Chapter 242. Nutritionist cum personal butler. Barbara Presetti. In such a dim environment, her skin still had an oily luster. Animal oil and animal fat. In the notes on the map given by the doctor, there was a description of Barbara with an asterisk. This oily woman must be careful. She is very difficult to deal with. In Han Dong's mind, it was an extremely fat woman, who knew that the situation in front of him was completely different. Long black hair that reached her waist. Perhaps it was because refining oil was a relatively hot process, but Barbara was only wearing a corset and a pair of shorts. Her slender waist, slender arms, and long legs were exposed, and they glistened with oil under the candlelight. Such a slender figure surprised Han Dong. After all, this was a woman who dealt with oil all day. Overall, Barbara's oily and smooth skin looked as if it had a layer of wax. She had deliberately sealed all the oil in her body to prevent it from being expelled through her pores. Her body was greasy and inconvenient to wash. There was only one goal in tonight's operation plan. He wanted to obtain a part of Miss Barbara's body and use it to disguise himself. He wanted to use her identity to go to the top floor of the ancient castle. Han Dong replied with a smile, "Don't worry, the high-quality fat ghouls will be delivered on time. I have already written a letter regarding the situation of the ghoul factory. I hope that Miss Barbara can bring it along when she replenishes the great feudal lord's nutrition. Put it on the table." "Okay." Han Dong held the letter and stepped into the oil refining room. The rich oil inside floated in the air in molecular form, and Han Dong's skin was also covered in a layer of oil. What was even stranger was that the oil on the wall reflected distorted human faces, and there were even tentacles dripping with oil in the mouths of the human faces. The pollution index in the oil refining room was terrifyingly high. This indirectly meant that this woman was very difficult to deal with. When he placed the letter, Han Dong glanced at the woman's side profile. Her delicate face was like an oil painting, and it made Han Dong feel as if he was looking at a master's wax figure. Other than the eyeballs, the rest of her body seemed to be fabricated. When he put down the letter and left, Han Dong deliberately slid his palm across the woman's shoulder, taking away a layer of grease. Once he was recognized by the faceless head, he could imitate the nutritionist and go to the 4th floor. Han Dong was just about to step out of the small study. Chirp! The flowing grease on the wall quickly gathered towards the door, forming a grease door full of painful faces, blocking the way out. "Doctor, I suddenly thought of something that I need to ask you. Are you free?" The door was sealed, and such questions did not give Han Dong a way out. "I'm free. Come with me." Barbara stopped her oil refining work. When he got up, the wall in front of him melted away on its own, or perhaps it was more accurate to say that this wasn't a wall in the first place, but rather a temporary wall made of grease. The interior corresponded to a wax figure room. A large number of exquisite wax figures were lined up here, almost identical to real people. It felt like a dark version of Madame Tussauds wax museum. Han Dong remained silent. If he had any doubtful expression at this time, it was likely that his identity would be exposed. Staring at these wax figures, Barbara sighed. Sighing, we are both researchers. You should understand my hard work. In order to allow my lord to eat normally and recover as soon as possible, I am immersed in the research of wax figure food every day, trying to make high nutritional value fats into wax figure food that is almost identical to humans. But my lord seems to dislike my work more and more in recent days, and the amount of food he eats is constantly decreasing. You also know that now is different from before. Where can I find humans? Although there are many human invaders coming to the manor this time, according to my lord's food intake, these humans can only eat for 10 days to half a month at most. I have to find a way to improve the simulation of the grease wax figures so that my lord can regain his original appetite. Do you have a way? Just now I was verbally targeting you because I was in a bad mood. I hope you can understand. When Barbara said this, Han Dong understood. This private butler was mainly responsible for the High Lord's diet. Not only was it as simple as making concentrated grease, but it also needed to be processed according to the High Lord's taste and preferences. After seasoning, the grease would be made into wax figure food that resembled humans. It felt like artificial meat. Han Dong stepped forward and peeled off a wax figure. The internal structure surprised Han Dong. This Madame Barbara's craftsmanship was exquisite. Even the internal structure of the human body was almost perfectly molded. All the internal organs were presented in the form of wax figures, and the softness was just right. Han Dong replied in all seriousness, "No matter who it is, they will get tired of eating the same thing every day. Your problem is not the level of simulation, but the materials used. Why don't you try adding some fungus oil to the original grease? I happen to have some fungi on me, and my lord is a ghoul by nature. He should like this kind of seasoning very much." Fungus oil, why didn't I think of that? Barbara, who was enlightened by Han Dong's words, was rather excited and approved of this method. In fact, this was not a difficult point to come up with. It was only because a person had been doing research alone for a long time that it was easy to become narrow-minded. This was also the reason why universities often held academic exchanges. Sometimes, a simple sentence from others could open up the narrow-mindedness in one's mind. Immediately after, with the help of the fungi released by Han Dong, Barbara made an improved grease. It took more than an hour to solidify it through a mold and create a brand new wax figure food. The taste did not change, but there was a refreshing feeling due to the consumption of the fungus oil. My lord will definitely like it. I'll send it to him now. Doctor, thank you. Madam Barbara, can I go with you? If my lord doesn't like it, you can explain that this is my suggestion. It's also convenient for me to report the factory to the High Lord in person. Barbara was applying oil makeup. She had to look her best when meeting the High Lord. All right. It's the High Lord's supper time now. Follow me. Okay. Han Dong was secretly delighted. With such a great opportunity, he could find out the route and method to the main hall in advance. The difficulty of tomorrow's operation would be reduced by half. But there were still risks. When reporting the factory's situation to the High Lord, there was a chance that his identity would be exposed. After applying oil makeup, Barbara used a device similar to a corpse cart to carry this brand new food to the top floor of the ancient castle. She then used a secret elevator hidden in the study to reach the main hall. On the large throne, the ghoul Lord Stewart was sitting paralyzed. His entire body was connected to a large number of infusion devices. Due to the death of his barber, he had not taken care of his hair for 2 days, causing a large amount of white hair to fall to the ground. Chapter 243. Barbara was pushing the waxen food. She walked barefoot on the carpet in the corridor, leaving greasy footprints with every step she took. It had to be said that if the greasy skin was ignored, the nutritionist herself was still very good-looking and body. In Han Dong's eye observation, under the nutritionist's greasy skin, there was an extremely compressed body hidden. Barbara's body was sealed inside through the greasy outer layer. Due to the high degree of compression, Han Dong could not see what the nutritionist looked like. The only thing he could see was the endless grease. Under Barbara's lead, they entered the family staircase. But there was a problem with how to enter the family staircase. The nutritionist was not equipped with the corresponding key. She just inserted her finger into the stone door keyhole that sealed the staircase. Through the grease configuration, the keyhole was filled and the stone door was opened. Without the nutritionist's guidance, it would be troublesome to enter the staircase. In this way, they came to the family area on the top floor of the castle. It was empty. Han Dong thought that this floor would be a scene of children and grandchildren, with 3,000 beauties. However, the top floor was filled with a sense of death, in sharp contrast to the luxurious family cadre's residence on the third floor. The eerie and dark aisle. A large number of white rags hung in the air. The old wooden doors on both sides of the aisle creaked due to the breeze. Some old oil paintings of women were still hanging on the wall, but the faces of the portraits were either torn or had no eyes, or were abnormally hideous or distorted. It really felt like entering a haunted castle. Han Dong naturally did not ask much about the situation above. He calmly followed Barbara to the study area. "Doctor, you haven't seen the Lord for a while, right?" "Yes. The Lord is not in a good mood recently. When you go down later, don't rush to explain about the factory. Wait until the Lord is full and then slowly talk about it. Once the Lord is angry, it will be very troublesome." Since Han Dong helped to make the greasy food, Barbara's tone became much friendlier. "Yes." Barbara moved the bookshelf on the right, the third row, and the 17th book, and removed the corresponding stone to reveal the keyhole hidden in the wall. She also inserted her finger into it. With the sound of gears, the bookshelf and the wall moved away. An old elevator appeared, bringing the two of them to the main hall of the ancient castle where the great lord resided. He was about to meet the final target of this training. The great lord might have already reached the level of hybrid demon, so the danger was self-evident. However, Han Dong remained calm. He tried his best to recall the doctor's words and actions in his mind. He could not afford to make any mistakes. Clack, clack, clack. The gears were completely stuck, and they had reached the bottom. Main hall on the iconic 8 load-bearing stone pillars, there were many candlesticks made of skulls. On the huge stone throne in the center, the great ghoul, Lord Stuart, was slumped on top of it. The infusion tube connected to the back of his head corresponded to a bag of light yellow and pink liquid. It could activate brain cells and ensure that his thoughts were clear and his consciousness was stable. The infusion tube connected to the heart corresponded to a vat of distilled essence oil of ghouls. All the muscles in his body were connected to a small tube that corresponded to a type of black agent. A small injection could activate the muscle tissue and ensure the activity of the muscle cells. As seen before, the great lord needed a large amount of medicine at any time to ensure his body's condition. This was not the ruler that Han Dong had expected. The great lord looked powerful, but in reality, he gave off a feeling that he was on the verge of death. It was as if he had been squeezed dry. Of course, if one did not look at the medicine and only observed the great lord's body, it was still quite shocking. He was about 5 meters tall, dark skin and very obvious muscle contours. His bones were completely exposed due to hyperplasia. A thick and dense layer of white bone armor covered the surface of his body, mainly covering the muscles, such as the 8 abdominal muscles corresponding to the 8 bone layers, giving off an indestructible feeling. The great lord's metabolism was abnormally high. He had not trimmed his hair for only 2 days, and his white hair was already dragging on the ground. His 1-meter-long claws rested on the armrests of the stone throne. On the back, which was blocked by the stone throne, there were a large number of gear auxiliary devices embedded in it to stabilize and strengthen the great lord's spine region. In terms of appearance, he was indeed powerful. However, when he saw this sickly great lord, the first thing that came to Han Dong's mind was the mother. The family members did not need medicine to support their bodies like he did. Why would the great lord, who ate the best and was treated the best, be like this? Moreover, he had to stay in the main hall 24 hours a day. There must be some unknown secret here. My lord, your supper is here. Today's supper has slightly changed the ingredient. I hope you like it. Barbara brought the cart in front of the great lord. His white hair swayed. Click, click, click. The sound of gears came from his back. Through the responsibility of this additional equipment, the great lord's back was supported, allowing him to slowly sit up straight. When he stared at the wax food on the cart that was exactly the same as usual, his soybean-sized pupils did not seem to have any sense of anticipation. He slowly pierced the wax with his nails and ate by skewering it. He opened his huge mouth full of sharp teeth and bit down. Smack! The wax food refined from fat exploded in his mouth like a pissed meatball. Unlike the pure greasy taste of the past, today's fat had an additional fragrance. The great lord's eyes slowly became spirited, and his eating speed also correspondingly increased. When she saw this scene, the private butler Barbara was very excited. She had never seen the great lord with such a good appetite. Because she was too excited, Barbara tiptoed and kissed Han Dong's cheek. A circle of greasy lip marks left on Han Dong's cheek. It was very uncomfortable. Barbara, it tastes good. I need another one. After the great lord ate an entire wax figure in a short period of time, he seemed very dissatisfied. Hearing such a request, Barbara was so excited that part of her skin was completely cracked, and hot oil flowed out. The meaning of her existence was to take care of the great lord. Good. The doctor is involved in the food production this time. I need the doctor to accompany me. However, the doctor seems to have something to report to you. The soybean-sized pupils turned to Han Dong, and a wave of pressure swept over Han Dong's body. This feeling was somewhat similar to the fallen Beck. Doctor, do you have something to report to me? Han Dong had already memorized the report written by the doctor. He reported the current damage to the factory and the need for reinforcement. However, when Han Dong finished his report, he received a strange response. Doctor, come here for a moment. Chapter 244. Exposed? Not necessarily. Han Dong was sure that there was absolutely no problem with his work report. As for the disguise, it was even more impossible for there to be a problem. After all, even the doctor himself found it difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. When he saw Han Dong pretending to be himself, he was shocked speechless. If one were to trace the origin of the faceless head, it seemed to be related to a certain old king. Naturally, its level was far higher than the lord. Han Dong stabilized his mind. His expression was calm, and wriggled his tentacles towards the giant stone seat where the great lord sat. He was getting closer. Some of the details of the great lord's characteristics were also clearer. The bone layer covering the surface of the body was terrifyingly dense. Such a defensive layer was difficult to break. When fighting with the great lord, one must find a gap in the bone layer or some parts that were not covered by the bone layer. Otherwise, it would be difficult to hurt him. Also, under the white hair, there was a face as old as a fierce beast. The yellow bean-sized eyes stared at Han Dong. Click, click, click. The gears inlaid in the spine began to turn, and the mechanical auxiliary device pushed the great lord forward. The terrifying face was close to Han Dong, less than a finger away. With such an oppressive gaze, even an experienced apprentice knight would definitely make some small movement. But Han Dong, who had seen all kinds of big shots and even spied on the yellow robe, was completely indifferent. Han Dong, who had faced Captain Keeman directly, was completely indifferent. Imitating the way a servant should act, he lowered his head slightly and listened to the great lord's orders. How is the recent production of the mother? All indicators are normal. The screening rate of high-quality ghouls is above the passing line. There has been no unstable situation. The great lord seemed to be relieved. Click, click, click. The gears moved his body back and leaned against the stone chair to rest. Okay. You go up and make food first. The taste is very good. The long-lost hunger is coming again. As for the ghoul factory, as long as the human intruders don't enter the main production room, it will be fine. I allow you to transfer 2 officers to ensure the safety of the production room. Thank you, great lord. Han Dong discovered a certain detail from such a conversation. A smile flashed across his face. Just like that, the first meeting with the great leader passed without any mishaps. He followed Barbara to the elevator and left the main hall. After returning to Barbara's room, Han Dong consumed a portion of his energy and released a large bottle of bacterial fluid through his right arm. Barbara only needed to add the fungus in the right ratio during the food preparation process, and didn't need Han Dong's help. The fungus was enough to make food for a few days. Just as Han Dong was about to leave, plop! A force acted on Han Dong's body, pushing him down onto the soft bed. Greasy and close-fitting, Madame Barbara directly pressed herself against Han Dong's body and reached out to stroke his swollen head. Thank you so much for today, Doctor. Let me express my gratitude. Although Barbara's outer shell was not bad, it was too greasy. Just by sticking to Han Dong's body, the overflowing grease soaked Han Dong's clothes. It was indeed a bit heavy. Wait a minute. I didn't bring things today. In addition, the factory still needs my supervision. Next time. Seeing that Han Dong didn't appreciate her kindness, Barbara naturally lost interest. I won't be in the mood next time. However, I still want to thank you for today. If the factory is invaded seriously, I can go down and help you. Thank you. After leaving the greasy room, a refreshing feeling swept through his body. After such an experience, Han Dong probably wouldn't want to touch meat for a few days. When he quietly returned to the blacksmith's room, Miss Wenli was still sleeping soundly on the bed, snoring continuously. Because Han Dong exuded a strong oily fragrance, the entire room was filled with such a smell. Wenli, who was sleeping soundly, stopped snoring after a while. Saliva flowed from the corner of her mouth, and she whispered in her sleep, "It smells so good." Han Dong, who was soaking in the bathtub, recalled the desolate appearance of the family area on the top floor, the sickly state of the great leader, and the degree of concern for the mother. The mother's position in the manor is higher than I thought. However, this doesn't affect the progress of my plan. As long as Mia can succeed, it's fine. Whether it succeeds or not depends on tomorrow. Han Dong threw away the greasy clothes and lay back on the big bed. Perhaps it was because of the slight shaking of the bed, or perhaps it was because some of the grease that penetrated the skin was difficult to wash away. In her sleep, Wenli seemed to treat Han Dong as a big delicious chicken leg. She slowly moved her body and leaned over. She reached out and hugged Han Dong. She even put her thighs on him. So heavy, Han Dong tried to move, but found that Wenli hugged him even tighter. If he moved again, he was likely to be bitten by Wenli. Forget it. Let's just sleep. Han Dong used the fungal layer in his body as a support and slowly adapted to Wenli's weight. He fell asleep just like that. The next day. It was also the 4th day of the training. Although no sunlight would shine through the window, Wenli woke up on time because of her biological clock. Her head was completely leaning on Han Dong's shoulder. There was even a pool of saliva flowing into Han Dong's shoulder. Not only that, Wenli's hands were also hugging Han Dong tightly. Her legs were also tightly clamped around him. The fragrance of meat from an unknown source drifted in the air. As luck would have it, Han Dong also woke up at this time. He opened his eyes and just happened to look at Wenli. For a moment, Wenli's cheeks turned as red as her hair. About 10 minutes passed. Wenli's face was red as she squatted in the corner and organized her huge backpack. She didn't dare to talk to Han Dong at all. As for Han Dong, he leaned against the bed and closed his eyes to rest. He seemed to be thinking about some problems and had no intention of taking action for the time being. After waiting for a while, Wenli couldn't hold it in anymore. She asked with a red face, "Deputy? Deputy Captain, when are we leaving? I've already packed my things." "No hurry. It's not time yet." "Oh." Wenli sat silently on the bed and ate beef jerky alone. Han Dong was actually waiting for a turbulent time. Yesterday, the castle area had been fully opened. Some elite teams had already made a preliminary exploration of the lower castle area and even killed the cadres to obtain the key. Today, they would definitely conduct a deeper exploration. The castle area would be in full battle. Boom! A loud noise was accompanied by a violent shaking. It seemed to have touched the foundation. There were a lot of footsteps in the corridor. A large number of guards and family cadres who were awakened rushed to the lower castle area to check the situation. Han Dong was also shocked by such a violent shaking. One had to know that the entire castle was quite spacious. It would not be easy to shake the entire castle. When the footsteps in the corridor gradually disappeared, Han Dong got up. "Wenli, let's go." Chapter 245. Castle, 2nd floor. Dance area. According to the detailed map drawn by the doctor, there were some unknown hidden areas in the dark side of the castle. The so-called dark side was a hidden area that did not have a clear door and needed to be reached through secret passages and mechanisms. Among them, the dance area was an important area in the dark side. In these areas, in addition to the wiki, there were also important clues related to the secrets of the castle, which could speed up the exploration of the castle. Once the hidden area was solved, the team could also obtain the corresponding training point. Abel led a 4-man team. Most of the time was spent searching the entrance of the dance area, during which they encountered gargoyles in the outer corridor. Through a secret passage, Dempsey's decryption ability quickly deciphered the mechanism, and everyone was scared but not in danger. They obtained a clue document about the dance area. After a night of rest and decryption of the clue document, today they came here again. Through the refraction problem, they adjusted the mirror mechanism in the hidden passage. The stone door of the dance area slowly opened. In the large and bright area, the walls were made of mirrors. Ballet dancers, using white cloth as a cocoon, hung their bodies in the air to rest. From the figures of these ballet dancers, they should be between 12 and 16 years old. But their faces were wrapped in layers of white cloth, so their faces could not be seen. In the dance room, there were hundreds of ballet dancers hanging in the air. Moreover, according to the records on the map, in the hidden dance room, there was a very senior cadre. Because the cadre's main body was only active in the dance room, they never participated in any family meetings. Even the doctor had not seen them personally, so there was not much information to provide. He only knew that it was a very special cadre. There is no need to hesitate, everyone prepare for battle. While the cadre hasn't appeared yet, let's get rid of these little things first. The ballet dancers hanging in the dance room, each of them emitted a polluted aura, and belonged to the category of evil. Everyone prepared for battle. Abel reached out and touched the portable goggles on his face, adjusting it to battle mode. His aura changed abruptly, and an almost solid white wolf shadow appeared on his back. Equipped with a pair of claw-type destiny weapons, he attacked the nearest dancer. The Mohawk berserker Dao immediately followed. When the sharp weapon cut open the bodies of these ballet dancers, what slid out was a kind of cartilage and a large amount of sticky white liquid. However, such a deep cut could not directly kill this strange evil. The disturbed ballet dancer immediately revealed a ferocious look. Her soft body coiled around the enemy, who had cut her like a snake. Whoosh! The head that was wrapped in white cloth split open from the middle. It revealed an extremely exaggerated round mouth with sticky saliva, and turned its head to bite Abel. The moment Abel's body was entangled, he immediately activated a power that came from the giant bear. Relying on brute force, he completely shattered the soft body of the ballet dancer. At the same time, he turned around and kicked the head that was about to bite him into pieces. Instant kill. As for the berserker on the other end, he was a little clumsier. He was bitten by Dancer, and her corrosive teeth easily tore off a layer of his flesh. The injury caused Dao's eyes to emit a red glow. His blood flow increased, and his overall attributes increased. He forcefully broke free from the restraints and cut off the ballet dancer's head. Just after the two of them each dealt with an evil, the ballerinas hanging in the dance studio began to sway, smack. They broke free from the pull of the white cloth and fell heavily to the ground. Because their bodies were too soft, they could not support standing at all. Even their hands and feet were like soft noodles when they crawled. It looked very strange. They could only wriggle forward on the ground like snake. However, these ballet dancers that crawled forward did not attack the crowd. Instead, they gathered toward the center of the dance hall. They kept overlapping and converging. In the end, they turned into a pure white woman with a white cloth wrapped around her body. Not only that, the woman was the center. Within a radius of 3 meters, a liquid-like field was formed. In the white liquid that formed the field, the dancer's long legs and arms would occasionally condense and form, twisting strangely in the air. It was obvious that once one got close to the field, they would be entangled and attacked by various limbs, greatly restricting their movements. Brother Demps, try using long-range magic. Okay. A solid fire spear was directly formed in Demps's hand. Through his own throwing and the propulsion of magic, the fire spear was shot out 3 times faster than ordinary magic and had stronger penetrating power. Buzz, then, a strange scene appeared. When the fire spear entered the white field, a large number of dancers' arms condensed from the liquid and automatically formed a white wall, blocking the fire spear and quickly dissolving it. Demps continuously threw out various offensive magic, and the situation was the same. An adaptive defensive domain. He's a very powerful member of the family. Captain, it will take us a lot of time to take her down, and the pollution she carries is also a big problem. Abel nodded and looked at the somewhat absent-minded Mia. Classmate Mia. Yes? Can you give each of us 2 bottles of anti-pollution potion? Yes. Prepare for battle. Just as everyone was preparing for battle, Mia's attention was not on this ballet teacher. Instead, she was carefully observing the dance studio through the spider's compound eye on her forehead. There was something that needed to be explained. Han Dong gave a total of 3 maps. The first one was given to Mia when they were alone in the room, and it was the most complete map. The second one was given to the newcomer team, and part of the map information was deliberately erased by Han Dong. The third one was given to the third-year team, led by the tank warrior Johnny, and many of the annotations on the map were erased. The only difference between the map in Mia's hand and the map in Abel's hand was the dance area. In the annotations of this area, Mia's map was more complete. A note marked with a black asterisk was written on Mia's map. Entrance to the broodmother's nest. The entrance to the broodmother's nest was hidden in this dance studio. As for the woman in white, she was the gatekeeper of the broodmother's nest entrance. The special task Han Dong entrusted to Mia was to find an opportunity in the dance area to separate from the team and go to the broodmother's nest alone. Just as Abel's team was fully besieging the woman in white, Mia's compound eye found a mirror with a slightly different refraction. In the battle, Mia quietly approached this unique mirror, released the curse power from outside the city, and reached out to touch the mirror. Ding! A ripple spread out on the surface of the mirror, and Mia had already disappeared. Demps, who was responsible for providing long-range magic support, looked at all of this from the corner of his eye. He had a slight smile on his face, and at the same time, he deliberately made mistakes in the following battle, putting himself in danger and attracting the attention of the deputy commander, Hydra. Chapter 246. Dance Area and the Entrance to the Nest. The cartilaginous woman in charge of the entrance to the nest was essentially a type of ghoul. A highly mutated deformed species, cartilaginous, could freely disassemble and liquefy. She was one of the most outstanding descendants of the mother. In terms of strength, she was comparable to Barbara, the personal butler who served the great lord. White liquid domain. This made it difficult for Abel and the others to touch the woman's body. Even if they could touch it, they could not determine where her fatal point was. There was once when Abel broke through the defense layer and cut off the woman's head. But as the white liquid on her neck surged, another head condensed and formed. Berserker Duin forcefully crossed the white water, and his entire body was corroded. Due to the injury, his berserker blood was activated and he was greatly strengthened. His rationality did not fall below the threshold, but if this continued, his life would inevitably be in danger. As for Demps, because he deliberately used melee magic, he put himself in danger. There was once during this period, a small python came out of nowhere and quickly wrapped around Demp's body, pulling him out of the white liquid and out of danger. After confirming that the deputy commander was secretly paying attention to his situation, Demps had achieved his goal. He no longer deliberately went easy and gradually became serious. When he took the initiative to retreat a certain distance, he took the iron-covered magic book from his waist and prepared to cast an advanced spell to tear apart the opponent's domain ability. Just as Demps was about to cast the spell, crack, an indescribable bestial aura spread in the area, and one could even faintly hear the howls of hundreds of beasts. Demps temporarily stopped chanting and looked over. He could not help but mutter, "Abel," while Berserker Duin was fighting with the target to buy time. Abel also retreated a certain distance. He rolled up his sleeves. He untied a heavy iron ring that bound his wrist. Howl! Visible to the naked eye, a white gas gushed out from Abel's body. Restrictive device. Abel, you really have a lot of trump cards. Demps smiled. It was a good harvest to be able to see Abel bring out some of his true abilities. Clang! When the heavy restrictive iron ring fell to the ground, the white hair on Abel's head grew rapidly, reaching his back and shoulder blades. The veins all over his body protruded. White gas was constantly exhaling between his sharp teeth. A beast domain formed around Abel. When Abel pounced on the target in this state, the beasts tore apart the defensive layer formed by the white liquid and quickly suppressed the target. After seeing this scene, Demps did not slack. A leather glove with a magic array drawn on it was worn on Dempus' right hand. The chanting ended. Using his other hand, he drew on the surface of the spellbook, and red words floated out. A crimson spear slowly formed in Dempus' gloved right hand. The space around the spear shaft sizzled, as if the magic energy density was too high, and the destructive power affected the space layer. After doing all this, Dempus was still not in a hurry to shoot out the crimson spear. He was still waiting. Of the target, of the target, of the target, of the target. Whoosh! Not long after, the beastly Abel tore open the fifth layer of membrane, exposing the heart of the woman in white to the air. Out. At this moment, the crimson spear was thrown straight at the core. Captain, move aside! With his bestial instincts activated, Abel's various senses had increased. Sensing the power of the spear, he immediately grabbed Dao and retreated. Deep Red ignored the effects of the domain. A red light flashed. Abel's spear pierced through the woman's heart. Heart-shattering. It wasn't over yet. The crimson spear that pierced through his heart suddenly began to distort. The magic energy contained in the spear shaft was completely released, as if a red lotus was blooming in his body. A crimson bolt of lightning struck down from the ceiling, tearing the woman's body apart. Swish! His heart was shattered. His body disintegrated. The white liquid gushed out like a tide and engulfed the entire dance studio. The degree of contamination was self-evident. At the critical moment, the python that had been hiding in the dark came out and dragged the three of them out of the dance studio. In the depths of the dark side, Mia, who had found the mirror entrance, successfully entered the deepest and most secretive area of the Stuart Manor, the Mother's Nest. According to the map, the Mother's Nest was located in the middle layer between the castle and the ghoul factory. Mia could see a large number of devices similar to meat tubes spread between the stone walls at the entrance of the nest. These meat tubes were connected to various areas of the castle and the ghoul factory. Some even extended to the town area. All the meat tubes were derived from the mother's body and came in various forms. The first type was a small meat tube about the size of a baby's arm. The main function of this type of meat tube was surveillance. The inner wall of the small meat tube was connected to nerves, and the end of the tube had an eyeball structure that gave it the ability to see. They were interspersed in various areas of the manor and the castle, monitoring everything in the manor. The eyeball that Han Dong saw in the corridor of the upper zone was the mother's eye. The second type was a medium meat tube about the size of a normal person's head. It was connected to the work area of the family's cadres. The family's cadres were required to put a standard amount of food into the meat tube every day for the mother's consumption. If they did not meet the standard, they would be punished by the mother. The third type was a large meat tube, whose size allowed a normal person to pass through it. It was mainly responsible for reproduction and transportation. The meat tube that Han Dong saw in the ghoul factory was the most important reproduction tube among the large meat tubes. The rest of the large meat tubes were connected to the important areas of the castle, including the main hall where the Great Lord was. Important members of the family with a certain level of authority could be quickly transferred through the large meat tube. Is this the mother's nest? It's so dangerous. Mia had already activated the spider curse. She restrained her breath and moved silently with the spider's long legs as she moved deeper into the mother's nest. When she came to the center of the mother's nest where a large number of meat tubes gathered. Even in the state of the curse, Mia's forehead was oozing sweat. When I return to the Holy City, I have to think of a request that can firmly trap Nicholas. Otherwise, it will be a big loss. If I want to suppress this kind of thing, I can't just use the cursed bell. Even if I release the spider curse, it will be dangerous. Nicholas, when we return to the Holy City, you have to be responsible for him. Mia took out a small bottle of dark purple potion from the inner compartment of the herb bag. She drank it in one gulp. Thump, thump, purplish-black lines spread from his heart to his entire body. Lost human form. Chapter 247. Han Dong's line of sight returned to him. Due to the loud noise coming from the bottom of the castle, the foundation of the castle had been shaken. Most of the upper zone's family cadres had rushed over to help fight against these human intruders. Only a few cadres remained in the upper zone, and the mother's eyes were monitoring the situation in real time. Now was the best time for Han Dong and Wen Li to sneak into the main hall. After a night of drying the blacksmith's skin, the skin was no longer as hot as it was yesterday. Today, they would continue to sneak in as blacksmith. Wen Li said she had a way. Han Dong had already been to the main hall once last night, so he was quite familiar with the route. Now, he only needed to rush there. However, things weren't as simple as he imagined. The two disguised as blacksmiths had just walked halfway through the empty corridor when a bone-chilling, bloody aura surged from behind them. If it were a family cadre, it wouldn't be so bad. They just needed to find an excuse using their identity as blacksmith. For example, they needed to hand over high-quality armor to Barbara so that she could pass it to the Great Lord. However, the person in the corridor wasn't a family cadre or a patrolling guard. It was a three-man team led by Blood Knight Lucius. According to Wen Li's description, this team's standard was one of the best in this training. Lucius had already obtained the key yesterday. Early in the morning, he came to the castle again and used the key to enter the upper zone. This was the variable Han Dong had to consider. It was also the key problem that Han Dong pondered while sitting on the bed while Wen Li was bathing yesterday. This team was enough to threaten the theft plan. He had to deal with this factor here, and not let them reach the main hall. You freshmen are really capable. When Lucius saw the blacksmith in the corridor, he immediately knew that there were 2 freshmen hiding inside. Yesterday, they had been to the blacksmith area and discovered that the blacksmith's corpse had disappeared. In addition, the 2 freshmen just happened to appear at the entrance of the blacksmith area. Naturally, these 2 matters were connected. At the same time, the necromancer apprentice in the team made his move. A large number of tiny bone spurs were thrown, not at the blacksmith. Swoosh! The surveillance eyes that covered the corridor were all destroyed by the bone spurs. Now you can come out with peace of mind. I have something to discuss with you 2 capable freshmen. Since the other party had already said so, Han Dong could only extricate himself from his disguise. Due to the fiendish aura Blood Knight Han Dong was giving off, Wenli only dared to hide behind him. Since they had met again, Han Dong no longer pretended to be a timid newbie. He smiled calmly and asked, "Seniors, what a coincidence. Is there anything I can help you with?" However, if this was the first time the 2 teams met, Lucius might have smiled and let the 2 newcomers leave. Unfortunately, Han Dong had already deceived Lucius once yesterday, and his acting and deception were both very good. Bloody hands under the dark red armor, 2 eyes emitting a red light could be seen. Lucius reached out. 2 arms made of blood appeared in front of Han Dong and Wenli. "Wenli, don't resist," Han Dong warned. The bloody arms grabbed the necks of the 2 and forcefully dragged them in front of Lucius. At the same time, the necromancer apprentice on the side used his withered fingers to touch the wrists of the 2. 2 multi-layered white bone handcuffs formed and tightly bound Miss Wenli and Han Dong. The bone handcuffs were not only abnormally strong. Moreover, once they felt an external force, the handcuffs would produce bone spurs that would injure the person bound. At the same time, the necromancer apprentice also used the bone chains to hold the bone handcuffs in their hands as if they were slaves. Blood Knight Lucius said in a low voice, "If the clues you provided are correct, we will let you leave when we enter the elevator. Until then, follow us well." Chapter 248. Bone Handcuff. A little excessive shaking will stimulate the bone and cause bone spurs to grow from the inside. Moreover, this kind of handcuffs should be monitored by this senior necromancer. Once we have the intention to break free, he will know at the first moment. It's really hard to deal with. We can only delay it a little. Han Dong, who was led like a slave, cast a "don't worry" look at Wenli. Before receiving the signal, Wenli only needed to wait quietly. At this time, Lucius, who was at the front, spoke in a heavy voice from his helmet. "By the way, we haven't introduced ourselves yet, right? I'm Lucius Tother, Crusader, specializing in Blood Knights. These 2 are my team members. Lunz Fiji, majoring in library, specializing in necromancy, and Jen Mikaziki, majoring in occult, specializing in shadow spells." "Occult? Senior." Han Dong glanced sideways at this senior who was surrounded by a dark aura and wearing a skull mask. He didn't expect that occult could also be used as an assassin. However, even though they were from the same department, this senior sister Jen didn't care about her junior's treatment at all. As freshmen, no matter what means you use to come to the upper zone, it shows that you are very capable. In addition, you can kill blacksmith and see through Lun's undead tracking, which proves that you are different from the rest. So, I have to be careful when dealing with you to avoid any mistakes. According to the map, the room not far ahead corresponds to the personal butler of the Great Lord, right? That's right. Well, Lunz, leave the indoor battle to me and Jen. You stay outside and watch the 2 of them. The necromancer apprentice named Lunz nodded slightly. "No problem. Captain, if you can't deal with the target in half an hour, I'll come in to help. I'll take good care of the juniors, haha." Facing the sealed wooden door of the bedroom, Lucius reached forward. A sharp, bloody gauntlet appeared on its own and easily broke the door lock with a claw. A greasy smell familiar to Han Dong overflowed from the room. Lucius and the other two smelled the disgusting smell and stared at the greasy wall in the inner room. Their expressions changed. The necromancer apprentice Luanze asked, "They don't seem to be ordinary family members. Captain, how about I let the skeleton soldiers guard them while we go in together?" "No need. Jen and I will be enough." After saying that, Miss Jane, who was wearing a skull mask, had her body automatically integrated into the shadow behind Lucius. She seemed to be adept at controlling the shadow. In addition to the goggles, Lucius's eyes were covered with a layer of blood mist to enhance the filtering of pollution. He officially stepped into the grease house. Careful observation would reveal that Lucius's every step seemed to be on the greasy ground. In fact, there was a layer of blood on the soles of his feet that separated the grease, preventing him from coming into direct contact with the grease. While preventing slippage, it also prevented contamination and corrosion. After a while, Lucius entered the compartment where Barbara was in the wax figurine making area. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The oil wriggled. The manufacturing area and the door of the dormitory were sealed by a thick layer of contaminated grease. Only the necromancer apprentice and Han Dong were left waiting in the passage. "Why is this smell so familiar?" Wenli sniffed the grease in the air and suddenly recalled what happened last night. Her cheeks were flushed. At this moment, the necromancer apprentice, Lun's Fiji, who was in charge of guarding the two, lifted his hood. Due to practicing necromancy, his face was thin, his hair was sparse, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Such an image was quite suitable for a necromancer. Han Dong also remembered that in his previous world, employees in a certain industry would also have a similar situation. In addition, Senior Lun's face was covered with a large number of strange tattoos. His two eyes, which were covered with a faint gray mist, stared at Han Dong. "You should belong to the same team as Demps Martin, right?" "Yes." Lunz asked curiously, "How is he? Is he very powerful?" "Recently, the entire library has been spreading information about him. It's not positive information. I heard that he seems to have an affair with the deputy librarian. I really want to see this unique junior." Speaking of this, Lunz stuck out a tongue from his mouth and licked his face. "Demps, he's all right, but I didn't see anything wrong." Han Dong only smiled. Currently, Demps was helping him. Naturally, he could not speak ill of him here, nor would he reveal the matter of him being a traitor. Lun's attention quickly shifted to Han Dong. "Your disguise ability is very interesting. How did you do it?" "Suturing." "Oh, no wonder. I heard that suturing masters can perfectly suture the limbs of various monsters onto the body of an individual. Skin suturing for disguise is a basic beginner. It's quite interesting. Don't worry, we won't make things too difficult for you. It's just that your acting yesterday was quite realistic and successfully deceived us, which made the captain a little angry. As long as you follow us obediently to the elevator to the main hall, we'll let you leave safely. With the captain's ability, as long as the Great Lord here is not at the level of a hybrid demon, we'll definitely be able to kill it. You just need to wait for the training to end." "Thank you, Senior." Han Dong only smiled silently and continued waiting. After a while, the shadow beside Luanze moved, and Senior Sister Jun, who was wearing a skull mask, popped her head out. "Lunz, come and help. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be dealt with. Also, I can't find the key." Try to use your necromancy to temporarily control this private butler and ask for the key, or ask her to lead the way to the main hall. "Oh, you want me to help?" Lunz did not seem to like entering such a greasy environment. This officer is a little different from the low-level officers. In terms of level, she's not far from a hybrid demon. "Come in quickly." "Coming. Coming." Lunz casually threw out a small pile of bones, which immediately formed a skeleton soldier with blue hellfire burning in its eyes. It was responsible for monitoring Han Dong and Wendy. Junior, don't have any thoughts of escaping. I've already said that we have no ill intentions. Following this necromancer apprentice, Wendy entered the inner room. Wenli immediately squeezed Han Dong with her shoulder, indicating that this kind of hard bone handcuff could not hold her at all and that she could break free at any time. However, Han Dong pressed his mouth against her ear and whispered, "Continue to wait. There's no need to rush." "Ah, okay." Such whispers made Wenli feel a little embarrassed. At the same time, she looked at Han Dong in confusion. She could not guess what he was thinking. Chapter 249. The grease dissipated and the battle was over. Lucius and his group escaped from the room. Han Dong noticed a small detail. Lucius, who had walked out of the greasy room, had a certain change in his pace and arm movements. Clearly, the battle with Grease Barbara was not simple. Lucius had either expended a certain amount of energy or was injured in the battle. Senior Zhen and Lunz were also somewhat uncomfortable. The distorted lines of contamination had spread all over their bodies. Seeing this situation, Han Dong thought to himself, "I've seen this grease before. She's much stronger than the average cadre, and she has a lot of spare grease and wax figurines. If you want to defeat her, you have to pay a corresponding price. No matter how powerful Lucius and his group are, they are still at the level of trainee knights in terms of contamination resistance. The contamination in the grease will inevitably lead to a deep infection when it comes into direct contact with the skin. With your physical condition, it won't be easy to enter the family area on the top floor." Just as Han Dong expected. After Lucius and his group left the room, they immediately took out a kind of anti-contamination potion from their belt. A powerful elite team like them had completed a large number of bounty missions during their 3 years at the Knight Academy and did not lack money. They would not drink the most basic contamination resistance potion, holy water. Any mission that involved contamination required the purchase of finished potions made by pharmacists from the trading center. The effect of the potion was very obvious. The dark lines that covered his skin and the area around his eye sockets had faded quite a bit. However, the outline of the contamination lines still existed. To completely eradicate the contamination, they had to return to the church inside the Holy City for baptism and pressure release. Any form of potion only had a superficial suppressive effect. If not eradicated, the potion's effect would be greatly reduced as the number of contamination increased. In the grease-filled room, the private butler, Barbara, knelt on the ground. Her brain had been destroyed, and her heart had been pierced. A blood curse seal covered her body. Her body was dead. "Sorry. The target's consciousness is too strong. I can't control it with necromancy." Lunz lowered his head apologetically. At the same time, because he failed to control the target, he also suffered a backlash on the consciousness level. Blood kept flowing out of his nostrils. "It's not your fault. The consciousness of a high-level inhuman is abnormally stable. Let's take a short break and continue to the top floor. We have to be the first team to make contact with the Great Lord. As for the key, we'll think about it when we reach the corridor." At this moment, Han Dong, who was bound by the white bone handcuffs, suddenly said, "If we can't find the key, we have a way." "What is it?" "My teammate, Wenli, majored in machinery. She's very experienced in model manufacturing. She might be able to help. If you do well enough, Renzi will have his skeleton soldiers escort you out of the upper zone safely. But don't try to play any tricks." Blood Knight Lucius appeared to be unusually cautious. He had already touched upon the origin of the matter and could not tolerate any mistakes. After resting for a while, the team arrived at the corridor leading to the top floor. A stone door with a complicated seal on its surface completely blocked the corridor. It was not advisable to break it by force. Senior Sister Zhen, who was a shadow assassin, tried to use a basic lockpicking method. She fiddled with the keyhole for a long time but was unable to open it. She shook her head slightly and returned to the team. Crack at this moment, Wen Li's handcuffs were released, but Han Dong was still handcuffed. Wen Li used the kerosene lamp and the magnifying goggles to carefully check the keyhole. She immediately took out a special forging flint from her backpack and began to forge the key on the spot. Blacksmithing. A freshman already has such skills? You're that old man's student? Lucius asked in surprise. Wen Li was completely immersed in forging the key and did not answer Lucius's question. After the key was forged, a very fine engraving tool was used to carve a unique pattern on the surface of the key. This pattern was just right to connect with the seal on the stone door. It was the key to opening the stone door. Sizzle! A large bottle of cold water was poured on the hot surface of the key to complete the final quenching process. Click! As the key turned, the stone door opened. Lucius's group was not the only one who looked at Wen Li with a different gaze. Even Han Dong was shocked by such exquisite forging skills. Wen Li's talent in blacksmithing was probably unmatched in the entire school. Click. For safety's sake, there was still a white bone handcuff binding Wen Li and tying her to the back of the team. The only difference was Lucius instructed the assassin in the team. Jen, you stay at the back to protect the safety of these two people. Leave the evil creatures wandering on the 4th floor to me and Luan Zhe. You were the most affected by the grease earlier, so rest well. Don't let it affect the final battle. Senior Jen, who was wearing a skull mask, nodded. The corridor was covered with a layer of gloomy fog. The closer they got to the top floor, the lower the temperature. They could even hear ghost-like whispers coming from the top. The official top floor was the family area. It was dilapidated, dark, and empty as if it had been abandoned for hundreds of years. It was a sharp contrast to the red carpet and lit candles on the 3rd floor. This huge contrast made Lucius feel very uncomfortable. There must be something dangerous hidden in the dark. Han Dong, who was at the back of the team, had a smile on his face. Last night, when he followed Barbara to the family area, they did not encounter any dangerous situations because they were officers. But, if it was a stranger, the situation would be somewhat different. Han Dong chose the top floor as the key to victory because a large number of ghosts lived here. A cold wind swept across Wen Li's body like a ghost's hand. When she stared at the strange portrait hanging on the wall, Wen Li was so scared that she immediately buried her head in Han Dong's back, not daring to look at it. Ah, so scary. It's okay, Senior Jen will protect us. When Han Dong looked sideways at Senior Jen, who was wearing a skull mask and did not say a word, he coincidentally noticed that a woman's portrait on the wall beside Senior Jen had undergone a strange change. The portrait, which had been punctured by the eyes, suddenly had 2 living eyeballs, staring at the group of people. Han Dong was about to remind them. Swish! 2 shadow daggers accurately pierced through the portrait and destroyed it at the same time. At the same time, Blood Knight Lucius, who was at the front, suddenly stopped. This was because about 2 meters in front of him, there was a white ghost pushing a baby carriage. There were some transparent tentacles floating in the baby carriage. Suddenly, a baby's cry mixed with some kind of high-ranking murmur echoed in the corridor. Everyone covered their ears at the same time. Chapter 250. Yesterday, Han Dong was in Dr. Swollen's office, flipping through information related to the mother. He accidentally found a pile of abandoned experimental documents. The information recorded on them seemed to be very interesting. After browsing the information about the mother, he opened the file out of curiosity. Han Dong was immediately attracted by the title Ghost Experiment and the keyword family. As early as more than 200 years ago, the Great Lord wantonly captured foreign tourists. Ordinary tourists would encounter dark scenes they had never seen before and fall into despair. But for outsiders who knew witchcraft, the Great Lord treated them with great hospitality. He wanted them to learn about these supernatural and mysterious spells. He was especially enthusiastic about witches. These witches with Nordic ancestry were often accompanied by nature and had good figures and appearances. The great lord forced them to stay and make them his harem. According to the file, there were a total of 13 witches in the great lord's harem, all of whom were witches of that era. When darkness fell, these witches with witchcraft abilities survived and gained more powerful abilities. However, the great lord was still stronger than them due to his special characteristics. It was difficult for him to escape from the castle. In order to erase the witch's desire to escape, the great lord specially selected a witch who had no value and had the strongest rebellious mentality. He burned her alive in the house as an example to others. An unexpected situation happened. When ordinary household servants, heretics, were cleaning up a burnt room, they could see the witches of the past wandering in the room through the mirror. Moreover, the witches would have a severe mental impact on the household servants. The next day they would die due to the freezing of all their organs. After that, Dr. Swollen personally took over the investigation and officially started the ghost experiment. He tried to use this characteristic of the witches to create a special ghost army for the great lord to use. However, the follow-up experiment led to the death of all the witches in the family area. The great lord immediately terminated the experiment, and Dr. Swollen's status was seriously affected. As for the process and method of the experiment, it had been completely destroyed and could not be accessed. Rare sound pollution. Cover your ears. When the baby's cry and the woman's laughter spread between the floors, everyone covered their ears at once. At the same time, Lucius waved his hand behind him. 2 hands made of blood helped Han Dong and Wenli cover their ears. At the same time, while Lucius was slightly distracted, the situation in the pram in front of him changed. A series of transparent spiritual tentacles grew rapidly and shot toward Lucius. Once touched, it would cause contamination on the mental plane. Furthermore, physical attacks were useless against such spiritual tentacles. If it were an ordinary novice knight, he would probably be flustered and randomly wave the weapon in his hand. In the end, the tentacles would penetrate his head, and he would be corrupted due to the direct contamination of the brain's consciousness. Lucius, on the other hand, was calm. His ears were filled with blood and his sense of hearing was sealed. Whoosh, a long sword engraved with runes was unsheathed. When Lucius held the hilt, the runic grooves on the blade were filled with blood, and the blade was also covered with a unique layer of blood mist. Blood curse, blue. Excellent fate equipment. It was a perfect match for the main body's attributes, making it one of Lucius's trump cards. Whoosh. The blade swung down. The translucent tentacle broke, and the remnant root did not even have the chance to heal before it was devoured by the blood curse. Die. Under the helmet, a pair of eyes flickered with red light. Han Dong had seen Cass use cross/ before. This was one of the most basic attack skills of the Crusaders, a super fast double slash. Cass had once used this move to tear open the chest of an adult ghoul. But the cross/ used by Lucius was completely different. It was like an advanced skill. When the cross/ was completed, a bloody cross emitting a murderous aura formed in the air and instantly pierced through the female ghost and the baby carriage. Wails echoed through the corridor. The ghost pushing the baby carriage was immediately killed by the bloody cross. So strong. Is this the highest level of strength in the seed-breaking stage? Han Dong was completely stunned by Lucius's combat strength. It was a wise choice not to provoke a conflict head-on. Such a small team was enough to confront a great lord head-on and even win. On the side, Wenli was also completely dumbfounded, becoming more and more fearful of this blood knight. Lucius sheathed the bloody sword and instructed the necromancer apprentice beside him. Luns, follow the route they gave us on the map. Use your skulls to scout the way. Okay. Luan Zhe released the 3 skulls burning with hellfire. 2 of the skulls were attacked and lost contact during the scouting process. The remaining skull successfully reached the study. There's nothing wrong with the map itself. It's just that the spirits wandering around this level aren't easy to deal with. Before dealing with the Great Lord, Captain, you need to maintain 100% of your stamina and condition. Leave this to me. Lunds rolled up his sleeves. On his skinny arms, necromancy runes were engraved into his flesh and bone. Lunds, can your stamina keep up? Lucius seemed to know what Lunds was going to do. Don't worry. The study is only 100 meters away from us. Using this ability for a short period of time is just a matter of a bottle of mana replenishment potion. After saying that, Lunds pressed his forearms together. When the necromancy runes touched and combined, the terrifying necromancy energy turned into hellfire and burned all over Lunds' body. His overall form was changing. Necromancer form. Lunds' entire body gradually floated up, and a rather powerful energy gathered in his palms. The eyes on his skinny face under the hood were replaced by 2 balls of hellfire. Through the hellfire, he could detect the movements of spirits in advance. In a dark passage, when a white spirit had just crawled out of a bedroom, Lunds gently raised his hand. Whoosh! A large number of bone spikes immediately rose from the ground and pierced the spirit's body. The surface of the bone spikes was covered in hellfire, a flame that specialized in burning spirits. As soon as it let out a scream, it was burned to ashes by the hellfire. In this form, the lucid energy in Lunds' skull would be consumed at an accelerated rate, and it was not suitable for long-term use. Staring at Lunds, who had a skull head, a cloak, and burning hellfire as he floated forward in the air, they felt like they were looking at the Grim Reaper. Any specter that appeared would be imprisoned by Luanze immediately and burned to ashes with nether fire. With the Grim Reaper leading the way, the squad moved forward at full speed. As they hurried along, it was inevitable that some spirits would launch sneak attacks from behind. Just as Senior Sister Jin used Shadow Kill to fight against these spirits, in the blink of an eye Han Dong, who was at the back of the squad, had disappeared at some point. When Senior Sister Jin reported the situation to Lucius, because Wan Li, who was in charge of unlocking the door, was still there, the authenticity of the map had been confirmed, and Lucius could not be bothered with it. If he wanted to court death, they could not do anything about it. Chapter 251. Family Area. In a certain compartment, the white bone handcuffs were cut off by a sharp weapon and fell to the ground. A greasy smell spread in the air. The greasy woman, Barbara, who had been killed, actually appeared in the room. Of course, this was not Barbara's original body, but Han Dong's. Last night, when Han Dong disguised himself as the doctor and came into contact with Barbara, Han Dong took the opportunity to take away a large amount of the origin grease. After being identified by the faceless skull, he could disguise himself. If he had not met Blood Knight Lucius and his group today, Han Dong would have disguised himself as Barbara to open the stone door and the elevator, and at the same time avoid being attacked by the ghosts in the family area. Currently, Han Dong took the initiative to leave the team for only one purpose: remove seal. The detailed map in Han Dong's hand was marked with an important piece of information. There was a red room in the family area that was strictly forbidden to enter. It was the bedroom of the witch who was first burned to death, and it was also an important room where Dr. Swollen conducted his ghost experiments. Due to the failure of the experiment, Dr. Swollen had to seal the most difficult to control witch's ghost inside to avoid affecting the castle's security. The strength of Lucius's group is truly terrifying. If they were allowed to enter the main hall, they would definitely be killed. If they enter the main hall, coupled with the hidden cards of this group of people, the Great Lord might really be killed, and the training would be over. In the end, the land deed would be taken away by the knights, and all my plans would be in vain. However, Lucius, this seemingly evil knight, has a pretty good nature. Unfortunately, I won't allow anyone to disrupt my plans. Han Dong touched the remaining blood beside his ear. When the sound pollution in the top floor spread, Lucius immediately covered his and Wen Li's ears. Han Dong still remembered this in his heart and would not make a big deal out of it. If he walked here as Barbara, he would not be attacked when encountering ghosts. In this way, he smoothly arrived in front of the red room indicated on the map. Several layers of seals were reinforced with an extremely hard stone. It would take a lot of effort to open it. However, Han Dong had his own ways. He gently placed his hand on the center of the stone door. When a speckled tentacle extended from his palm, it forcefully contaminated the stone door, destroying all the layers of seals. Rumble, activating the potential of the G-virus, he pushed open the heavy stone door with all his strength. In front of a dressing table full of cobwebs sat a woman with a voluptuous figure. She was wearing a black gauze dress. However, the face reflected in the mirror would make people lose their desire in an instant. There was an indescribable feeling. The face of the witch's ghost was wrapped in rings of translucent tentacles. The seal was lifted. Many mouths split open on the surface of the tentacles on the woman's face, and a kind of laughter that carried thick pollution echoed on the top floor. The sleeping ghosts were awakened by such laughter. What was that sound? When Lucius and the others, who had just arrived at the study, heard the strange laughter, the stripes near their ears deepened. Luns, who had intended to deactivate his necromancer form, could only maintain it. "Captain, Jen, you guys look for the entrance to the elevator. I'll guard the door." "All right." Senior Jen had already merged her body into the shadows and quickly looked for the entrance. Just 2 minutes later, Luns, who was blocking the door, turned his head awkwardly and looked at Lucius with eyes that were emitting hellfire. "Captain, things are a little troublesome, I need your help." The number of ghosts gushing out of the tunnel was about 3 times more than when they were rushing here, and they were still gushing out from various rooms. Also, in the deepest part of the dark tunnel, the necromancer Luns faintly saw a completely different individual, exuding an aura that made Luns feel dangerous. The temperature on the top floor of the ancient castle was also constantly dropping because of her existence. Luns drank a bottle of mana recovery potion and cast the secret technique that was supposed to be used to deal with the Great Lord. Tala Tala! A series of bones fell to the ground. He flipped open the old magic book in his hand, chanted a spell, and threw out a ball of hellfire that merged with the bones on the ground. The bone pieces combined. 3 skeleton soldiers that were burning with hellfire formed. They were more powerful than ordinary skeleton soldiers, and their attacks could cause direct damage to the ghosts. Blood Knight Lucius also rushed over immediately. Drip! A drop of blood from the tip of the sword fell to the ground. A blood field about 3 meters wide was formed, and it could launch a blood hand attack on any ghosts that entered the range. It could restrict or even tear the target apart. Luns, have your skeleton servant guard the study. We'll deal with the main body that caused the ghost wave. If we don't kill this main body woman, the ghosts might surge out endlessly. We can't keep wasting time like this. After this, we'll take a short break and postpone the time to deal with the Great Lord. All right. The 2 elite trainee knights showed their abilities and went up against the large number of ghosts, heading straight for the terrifying woman standing in the distance. Inside the study, Senior Jen had found the location of the hidden compartment through the shadows. Just as she reappeared and was about to have Wen Li forge the key, cough cough cough, a series of coughs came from the door. The necromancer Luns had bloodstains at the corner of his mouth. He clutched his chest with one hand and returned to the study, his eyes filled with fear. "Jen, there's a ghost outside that has reached the hybrid demon level. The captain is still holding on. We have to leave this place." After saying that, Luns knelt on one knee and coughed non-stop. A bunch of filthy tentacles came out of his mouth. It seemed that the filth had spread all over his body. The situation was terrible. Hybrid demon? How is that possible? When Senior Jen took off her mask, a delicate face with black lipstick was revealed. It seems like someone has opened a seal on this level. We have to hurry and help the captain. Otherwise, the captain will, cough cough cough. Okay. Senior Jen quickly went up to support him. However, just as she reached out and touched Lun's arm, a slightly different feeling spread throughout her body, causing her to frown. As an assassin, she was very good at capturing details. The feeling of her skin was slightly different from Lun's shriveled skin. You! For a moment, an eye suddenly opened above Lun's head and looked directly at Senior Jen. Senior Jen, I'm sorry. In a situation where there was zero distance and she was unprepared. He used the little magic eye's consciousness interference ability and caused Senior Jen to fall into a temporary blank state. He easily pushed her out of the room and completely sealed the door of the study. The disguise was cancelled. The necromancer apprentice transformed into Han Dong's appearance. The premise of a perfect disguise was that a part of the person being disguised was required, such as Barbara's oil. The white bone handcuffs that shackled Han Dong were part of Lun's. With this, the disguise was perfect, and even the skeleton soldiers guarding the door couldn't recognize it. Wow. Vice Captain, how did you do it? Let's not talk about this first. Won-Li, hurry up and get to work. Okay. Won-Li easily broke the handcuff. The bone spurs installed in the handcuffs couldn't penetrate her high-density muscle fibers at all. Won-Li first took out a few mechanical reinforcement devices to strengthen the door of the study before forging the key. During the forging process, Han Dong put all the secret books in the study into his backpack, completing his agreement with Magician Dem. Boom, boom, boom. The door of the study was chiseled open by Lucius's giant bloody hand. Han Dong and Won-Li were already standing in the elevator. The secret door was slowly closing. The ghosts in the family area on the top floor had all been killed by this three-man team. Correspondingly, Lucius and the others were also seriously contaminated. The contamination lines around their eyes had a purplish-black color. In such a state, they couldn't fight against the High Lord at all. Before the secret door closed, with a smile on his face, Han Dong waved at Lucius and the others, who were deeply contaminated. Seniors, you've worked hard. Congratulations on obtaining the title, Wage Worker. By the way, I'll return the previous sentence to you. Stay here and wait for the training to end. Chapter 252. Crack, crack, crack. Every time the old elevator moved down a certain distance, the sound of machinery jamming could be heard. At such a slow speed, it would take some time to reach the first floor from the top floor of the castle. It was enough time for Han Dong and Won-Li to make the necessary preparations. Of course, as the elevator descended, an aura that was completely different from that of the cadre was emitted from the lower end. Won-Li clenched her teeth slightly, appearing slightly nervous. She never thought that she would have a direct confrontation with the big boss during her first training. Vice Captain. Speaking of which, we offended the Blood Knight. He will definitely cause trouble for us in the future. How much trouble can it be? They even dare to make a move in the academy? Don't think too much. They were the ones who started it. Han Dong did not take this matter to heart at all. If this group of people really wanted to cause trouble after this, Mr. Black and White would help to solve it. Moreover, in terms of individual strength, Han Dong was not afraid of anything. Won-Li, take out all the equipment you made in the blacksmith's district. Oh. She took out the equipment that had the same conditions as the Meat Shield Warrior Johnny's team from the huge backpack one by one. Vice Captain, do we have to wear these useless imitation equipment to fight against the Overlord? That's right. Han Dong nodded calmly. Why? These equipment can only provide basic defense. It's completely useless. No reason, just do as I say. Oh, after saying that, two completely different auras appeared. Clang, clang, clang. The iron chain dragged on the ground, floating in the air along with the fire wick. Togu Gonzalez appeared. At the same time, a woman in red with floating black hair had already gently touched Han Dong's shoulder. Just the gaze under the black hair scared Wenli so much that she sat on the ground and trembled. Miss Chun-Li, don't scare her. Okay, the evil aura was restrained. Chun-Li took out a rubber band and tied her hair into a ponytail, revealing a slightly thin and delicate oval face. Because of the evil bead, Chun-Li, who had turned into an evil practitioner, had her lifespan extended correspondingly. She also became much younger. She looked like a big sister who had just entered the workforce. Because the aura of fear on Chun-Li's body had completely dissipated, Wenli slowly regained her senses. So beautiful. Are you Asian? Master told me that the world is very big. In the East Dragon City, there are a group of black-haired, yellow-skinned Orientals. What's more, the martial artists in Dragon City are very powerful. Chun-Li didn't understand English, so Han Dong answered, "Well, Miss Chun-Li is from the East. She came from a civilized, harmonious, strong, democratic, and technologically powerful country." Han Dong's description was not excessive. To be able to survive in the form of Dragon City in such a doomsday, it was not an exaggeration. This meant that even in a parallel world, his country was still very powerful. Wow! Alright. The elevator is about to reach the main hall. Everyone quickly put on the corresponding equipment. Toga's height and physique were just right for him to wear Johnny's equipment. Chun-Li put on a cloak and carried a longbow on her back, pretending to be a beast-eared senior in the team. In the team, there was also Fire Mage, Leopold Henry, and Clergy Mage, Hepburn Lawrence. Both of them wore robes that covered their entire bodies and had soft metal armor on the inside. Han Dong and Wenli only needed to put on similar robes and cover their faces with a hood to complete the basic disguise. It was not a big problem. Up until now, Wenli still couldn't understand the vice-captain's purpose. Click, they reached the bottom floor. Because of the equipment, the four of them really looked like an adventurer team from a fantasy anime. There was a warrior, an archer, a mage, and a priest. They officially stepped into the castle's main hall where the final boss of the training was located. The moment they left the elevator, an invisible pressure came from the stone seat in the center. Looking from the entrance of the elevator, they could vaguely see the outline of a huge black human lying on the stone seat. There were no guards here, nor were there any family cadres. There was only the Great Lord. Relying on the light emitted by the skull candles on the 8 huge stone pillars, the group walked along the main hall's path and arrived in front of the stone seat. Han Dong had already seen the Great Lord's terrible condition, so he wasn't particularly surprised. Just like yesterday, a large number of infusion tubes were connected to the Great Lord's body to maintain his physical condition. The Great Lord's soybean-like eyes stared at the group of people who came to find him. There was no sense of anger. "You actually managed to avoid surveillance and come to the main hall in advance while most of the intruders were still at the bottom floor of the castle. You guys are quite capable. Since you can come here, it means that Barbara has been killed by you guys. She was considered a very good personal butler. If you continue to train her, she will very likely reach the same height as me. It's a pity that she was killed by you guys like this." The Great Lord's words were not particularly angry. Instead, it was more of a pity for Barbara's death. "Since I'm here, let me exercise a little." Click, 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 the gears embedded in the spine turned slowly, supporting the Great Lord from a lying position to a sitting position. White hair hung on the surface of the white bone armor. First, he reached for the back of his head. Whoosh! He pulled out the tube connected to the back of his head that was filled with a light pink liquid. Then, the Great Lord's muscles bulged. Relying on the contraction of his muscles, he automatically pushed out the small tube that was inserted between his muscles. With both hands on the stone pedestal, he used the gears in his spine to slowly support his body. Calculating the time, the great lord had not stood up from the stone pedestal for over a year. He had a muscular body that was 5 meters tall, manic white hair that reached his waist, terrifying white bone armor, meter-long sharp claws, and a corrupting aura that radiated from the great lord's body. None of them could compare to him. The great ghoul, Duilio Stewart. He was the final boss of this training. Once he was killed and the great lord's head returned to the town, the training would come to an end. The small team that killed the great lord would also receive a unique reward. But the difficulty was naturally very high. Even someone like Blood Knight Lucius had to ensure that he was in peak condition before he dared to lead his team to the main hall. "Young human, come and challenge me, Duilio." Togu had long since lost his patience. Chains extended from the gaps in his armor and dragged them to the ground. He waved his arms with all his strength and used 2 scorching hot chains to lash at the great lord's body. Clang! Sparks flew. Just as Han Dong had observed, the white bone armor that grew on the great lord's body was rather terrifying. It was basically impossible to destroy. The great lord waved his hand. Unexpectedly, such a large body that required medicine to replenish itself actually had an unexpected speed. When the palm came, Togu had no time to dodge. Clang! In the blink of an eye, Togu was sent flying. His body was embedded in the wall more than 10 meters away. Chapter 253. Weak, petty, incompetent. Humans are always like this. Disappointment filled the great lord's eyes as he stared at the armored knight that he had slapped into the wall. Just as the great lord was about to crush the next target. Crack! Togu, who was embedded in the wall, moved slightly. Then, he slowly pulled his body out of the stone wall and stood firmly on the ground. He tidied up the stone debris on his body as if nothing had happened. Inside the thick helmet, Togu revealed an extremely rare smile. A broken tongue stretched out from his dark mouth and licked his face crazily. Excitement. Togu was excited because of the pain. He couldn't wait to return to the great lord and continue to be beaten. That slap just now made Togu feel extremely comfortable. It was as if all the meridians in his body had been unblocked. At this moment, Han Dong sent a message through the master-servant relationship. Togu, you are not allowed to be beaten on purpose in this battle. The destructive power of this great ghoul is far from comparable to the barber or blacksmith from before. If you are not careful, you will suffer irreparable injuries. Moreover, the next step will be the key to my plan. We must completely suppress the great lord as soon as possible. The battle will be carried out by the 4 of us. Togu, you are mainly responsible for restraining him. If you have the chance, use your lava to burn him deeply. Once you can suppress the great lord, I will promise you one thing. After returning to the holy city, I will satisfy you whatever suffering you want. Hearing his master's promise, Togu was so excited that his eyes were rolling. Compared to the temporary comfort now, Togu was naturally more inclined to the long-term satisfaction of suffering. Good. He accepted the request. It was different from the previous battle. Togu entered battle mode at the first moment. Lines of hell lava covered his entire body. Not only that, even the ordinary armor on Togu's body was undergoing purgatory transformation. This kind of transformation could actually be applied to external equipment. The connection points of the armor were replaced with lava lines. The helmet was burning with hellfire. It turned into a purgatory armor that completely fit Togu's body. Portability, hardness, and fire resistance were all improved. It would also cause an appropriate amount of fire to counterattack the attacker. After the purgatory transformation was completed, Togu officially launched a fierce attack. Clang! A chain shot out from his palm and wrapped around the great lord's neck. Sizzle! Without the protection of the white bone armor, his neck was immediately burned by the iron chain and a large amount of white smoke rose. At the same time, Togu used the chain to fly towards the great overlord's head. He was prepared to directly attack the head. However, this process required time. The Great Lord naturally discovered Togu's situation when he sensed the iron chains binding him. But, with a slap, Togu, who was in midair, was slammed heavily into the ground. Gravel flew everywhere. Togu's body was completely embedded in the ground, but, what's going on? The Great Lord could clearly feel a powerful pushing force coming from the area of his palm that was pressing downwards. The target that received another direct hit still showed no signs of dying. Moreover, it was very powerful. The Great Demon Lord's palm was slowly being propped up. Togu was using a weight-lifting posture to slowly lift the Great Demon Lord's palm. It was also at this moment the rest of the team began to move. "Let me help you." Miss Wunli quickly rushed to the area where the palm was pressing downward. She cooperated with Togu to resist the Great Demon Lord's palm. As Wunli exerted her strength, the combined strength of the two was actually greater than the Great Demon Lord's palm. She actually managed to push the Great Demon Lord's palm back. At the same time, the Great Demon Lord's body also showed a slight imbalance. Due to his unstable center of gravity, he took a step back. Just as the two strength-type teammates attracted the Great Demon Lord's attention, a dark red figure had quietly approached the back of the Great Demon Lord's neck. Her body was so light that she didn't feel anything when she stepped barefoot on the Great Demon Lord's skin. The evil energy under her feet almost completely eliminated the feeling of touch. That evil bead was activated. Several dark veins began to spread from the woman's abdomen, along her torso, shoulders, arms, and all the way to her right palm. Wisps of yin energy from the evil bead overflowed from her fingertips and wrapped around the kitchen knife. Through the yin energy molding method, the kitchen knife was molded into a sinister long knife that was 1.5 meters in length. Because it was fused with the barber's scissors, its sharpness was increased by another level. Whoosh! The knife cut through the back of the neck. The blade was long enough to cut through the neck. Just as the blade was about to cut through the aorta and trachea, click, there was a crisp sound of something jamming. To think that such a sharp blade that was enhanced by yin energy would actually get stuck in its master's grasp. Chun-Li herself was also shocked. Through the cut flesh, Chun-Li discovered that the important aorta and trachea inside the Great Demon Lord's neck were connected to the cervical vertebrae. They were all wrapped in a strange metal shell. The surface of the metal shell also had a pattern that Han Dong had never seen before. It seemed to be a kind of enchantment used to reinforce the shell. Oh no! Due to the attack, the Great Demon Lord's cervical vertebrae immediately reacted with defensive feedback. Click, 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 there was a mechanical sound. A mechanical tentacle embedded with a gear structure grew out of the cervical vertebrae and whipped towards Chun-Li with great force. When Chun-Li pulled out the evil sword, it was already too late for her to dodge. Hair. Using the barber's skill that she had just learned, Chun-Li manipulated her hair in front of her body. Smack! The tentacle hit. A large amount of broken black hair drifted in the air. Even though the black hair offset most of the damage, the strong impact of the mechanical tentacle still affected Chun-Li's body. Chun-Li immediately fell to the ground like a bullet. She did not have Togu's defensive power. If she hit the ground at high speed, she would definitely break several bones, which would seriously affect the rest of the battle. At the critical moment, a black shadow that resembled a crow flashed over. Through the cushioning of the crow's feathers, it steadily caught Chun-Li in its arms. "Be careful, Miss Chun-Li." When Chun-Li looked up, Han Dong's face happened to be right in front of her. Slightly blushing, she hurriedly turned into a red shadow and stood close to Han Dong. She simply reported the important information that she had captured during the battle. "Okay, I got it." Han Dong had already activated Little Demonic Eye and stared at the Great Demon Lord's body. The wound on the Great Demon Lord's neck had completely healed in a short period of time, ultra-rapid regeneration. For such a ghoul, the ability to regenerate was normal. What surprised Han Dong the most was the Great Demon Lord's body structure. When I met the Great Demon Lord yesterday, I couldn't see the true structure of its body because I didn't activate Little Demonic Eye. Now that I look at it, it's really exaggerated. No wonder it needs a lot of medicine to support its body. This Great Demon Lord is really unscrupulous in order to obtain power. In addition to supporting the body, the Great Demon Lord's mechanical spine was also an important mechanical center of the body. A high-level mechanical technology obtained from an unknown source was applied to the Great Demon Lord's body. Every organ was coated with metal, and every muscle was driven by mechanical gears. The spine was the core power source for all of these mechanical operations. No wonder its speed was so fast. It turned out that in addition to the muscles, it was also embedded with mechanical assistance. Moreover, there were seals on the surface of these metals. In other words, if he wanted to hurt the Great Demon Lord, he did not just need to break through the external bone layer. He also needed to break through the internal metal and barrier layer. The difficulty in defeating the Great Demon Lord of the Manor was how to break through its defense. However, Han Dong did not intend to kill him from the beginning. Chapter 254. As you can see, this ghoul's body has been completely modified by an unknown metal. Moreover, the metal shell has been precisely engraved with a barrier, which can greatly reduce magic damage. This is also why the effect of covering your weapon with Yin energy is not as good. In the following battle, aim to attack his 2 legs. Try to destroy the metal in his legs as much as possible and reduce his mobility. Even if he has ultra-rapid regeneration, regeneration is useless against metal. Okay. Chun-Li retracted the evil energy covering the surface of the kitchen knife and covered her entire body with it. In this way, she could increase her mobility and concealment. She planned to use the kitchen knife itself to cut off the skin on the Great Lord's legs. You and Togu, take care of Miss Chun-Li. Her strength is even more terrifying than Togu's. She can become a sharp weapon against the Great Lord. Just as Han Dong finished his sentence, a voice rang out. On the other side, Chun-Li helped to drag Togu out of the ground. Chun-Li was wearing a robe for disguise, but she was holding an iron hammer in her hand. Coupled with her muscles, she looked very out of place. However, Chun-Li was wearing another piece of equipment that had never been seen before under the robe. It was a chainmail with a lion's head printed on it. The chainmail emitted a silver light and could directly resist a large amount of physical damage. Chun-Li, who was serious, was no longer afraid of anything. She saw Togu using the iron chain to restrain the Great Lord. She quickly rushed forward and smashed the iron hammer with all her strength on the Great Lord's calf. Crack! The sound of bone breaking could be heard. Chun-Li's hammer actually made a long crack on the hardened bone layer covering the calf. Han Dong and Chun-Li saw this scene. Han Dong immediately changed his tone. Chun-Li, temporarily give up on attacking and focus on assisting Miss Chun-Li. With her strength and this iron hammer that came from nowhere, we should be able to speed up the plan and break through the Great Lord's armor layer ahead of time. Okay, seeing this scene, Chun-Li also acknowledged Chun-Li's destructive power. This seemingly timid little girl, who went out for a mission for the first time, actually had such strength. She needed to make good use of it. On the other hand, Chun-Li, wow. So hard. If such a material is used to forge armor, it should be quite good. Chun-Li did not have much experience in combat, and under the circumstances where she had failed to penetrate the enemy's armor, Gue had stupidly continued to attack. At the same time, the Great Lord's claw swiped at Chun-Li's body as soon as it felt its bone layer shatter. Just as Chun-Li panicked slightly and tried to block the attack head-on, a gust of cold wind swept past her body, and 2 slender and cold arms hugged her body, pulling her out of the attack range of the claws. Sister Chun-Li, the person who brought her away was Chun-Li. Staring at Chun-Li's cold face, Chun-Li felt that she was a little handsome. Don't just stand there stupidly after attacking. After being lectured by Chun-Li, Wan-Li nodded slightly. Got it. Togu and I will help you pin it down. Do your best to destroy the structure of this large ghoul's leg and break its bones. Alright. When Han Dong saw this scene from afar, he was no longer worried about anything. Togu and Chun-Li had rich combat experience, and as long as the Great Lord did not use any large-scale damage skills, they would basically be fine. Han Dong retreated to the side of a giant pillar and removed his bird-beaked doctor attire. At the same time, he touched the crow glove on his left arm. Caw caw caw, the glove transformed into a dozier crow, and its black eyes kept shaking out of fear. Its body trembled, and many feathers were shaken off. If not for Han Dong standing there, this cowardly crow would probably have peed its feathers out of fear. He made contact with the dozier crow's head through his palm and established a consciousness connection. Stuart Lead. Leader? I'm scared. What are you scared of? It's not like I'm letting you participate in the battle. Listen carefully, use your scouting ability to find the main channel in the main hall. Once you find it, come back and tell me. When the dozier crow heard that he was going to act alone, it stared at the pitch-black hall, feeling that the Great Lord's terrifying guards were hiding in the dark. Bring people. Aren't your eyes easier to find? All right, I'll go find them. You deal with the Great Lord. Then I'll go find them. If you dare to hide and slack off, I'll roast you and eat you. I'll feed your butt to the pigs. When the dozier crow heard this, it trembled in fear. Its expression changed, and it patted its furry chest. I, the dozier crow, will definitely complete this important mission. I won't slack off. Don't talk nonsense. Go quickly. Han Dong lifted his leg and kicked the crow's butt. Caw caw. The dozier crow that was kicked away could only bitterly check the surrounding walls of the hall one by one. Han Dong took a deep breath. Phew. If I want to suppress the Great Lord, I have to use all my strength. Since I obtained the G-Virus, I have never seriously used its true power. This is a great opportunity for me to practice. Han Dong pulled up his sleeve and officially revealed his right arm. The disguise was removed. A giant eyeball opened at the top of his arm. The entire right arm's length just reached the ground, and very conspicuous green veins protruded from the surface of the skin. The G-Virus had fully integrated into the nucleus of the cell and encoded a new type of protein, inducing fundamental changes in the individual. The original ghoul arm had completely changed during this process. In Han Dong's biological laboratory, there was a new examination report about the right arm, and its name was no longer Mature Ghoul Arm. G-type Corpse Arm Quality. Rare, originally excellent. The quality is divided from low to high as follows: gray, rough, white, normal, green, excellent, blue, rare, purple, unique, pink, epic, gold, legendary, dark gold, empire. Weight requirement: 40 points. Basic characteristics: great strength, provides a strong arm strength to the host. Regeneration: due to the G-Virus activating the cell potential of the arm area obtains a strong regeneration characteristic. Detected that the host's body is also affected by a small amount of the virus. Regeneration is about 1/10 of the arm. Characteristics: 1. Sharp claws, enhanced. Can normally cut stone and metal materials with hardness no more than 400 HB. 2. Cemetery fungus, when causing damage to the target, it will infect at the same time. 3. Adaptive dynamic visual feedback. The giant eye growing on the arm can automatically capture visual information and carry out various stress responses, attacking, parrying, and other actions in advance. The host can automatically turn on and off the feedback function according to the battle situation. Note: this arm has been upgraded at the Ghoul arm level with the G-Virus, Advanced Plague. The overall quality has been improved, all attributes have been strengthened, and the weight requirement has been increased. Please pay attention to contain the G-Virus to avoid being engulfed by the virus. Chapter 255. Boom. A burning figure flashed through the main hall and violently crashed into one of the 8 giant stone pillars. Due to its extreme speed, it directly shattered half of the stone pillar. Togu, who fell along with the shattered stone, climbed up after only a second. First, he pinched his chin with one hand and forcibly twisted his dislocated chin back to its original position. Then, he swung his right arm to reposition his dislocated forearm and continued to charge at the High Lord. In the eyes of the High Lord, this was simply an unkillable cockroach. Moreover, Togu's own destructive power was not low. The High Lord's palm was already scorched in many places. Even if his regenerative ability was strong, it would still leave burn scars. Once he suffered a deep burn, his regenerative ability would also be affected. As for Chun-Li, she used another method to contain the High Lord. Using the evil energy and the dark environment, she continuously entered the darkness. From time to time, she would stab the High Lord. Although she could cut into his flesh, it was difficult to break through the internal metal. She tried her best to attract the High Lord's attention. Under the cooperation of the two of them, the High Lord was restrained. The fiery-haired Miss Wenli found an opening to get close to the High Lord. She used her master's forging hammer to hit the High Lord's leg heavily. This was already the 4th strike. Clang. Ka. An entire piece of bone armor covering the surface of the calf muscles finally could not withstand such a strike and finally shattered. As long as they could chisel through the internal metal layer of the calf and completely destroy the calf tissue, it would greatly affect the High Lord's mobility. What a bunch of unkillable cockroaches! I'll seriously play with you guys. Ka ka ka. The sound of mechanical gears came from the High Lord's spine, as if it was changing gears. Speed shift, a dark energy surged under the High Lord's skin, and his aura increased accordingly. Chun-Li, who was hidden in the dark, immediately noticed this detail and loudly reminded the inexperienced girl, "Wenli, be careful." Buzz. The sound of wind breaking rang in their ears. His speed increased explosively and he grabbed Wenli. At the same time, the High Lord's other hand firmly caught the incoming iron chain and pulled Tai Liang forcefully, causing Togu to lose his center of gravity and be directly pulled off the ground. As if throwing a hammer, he threw Togu heavily. Boom! Togu's entire body smashed into one side of the wall like a cannonball. The depth of the wall was even deeper than the previous time. This startled the dozier crows that were searching for the mother pipeline nearby. This time, the speed at which Togu broke away from the wall was clearly slower than before. The fierce collision just now had directly shattered Togu's ribs, and a few broken bone spikes had pierced through his internal organs. The situation wasn't too good. In the shadows, Chun-Li attempted to launch a sneak attack from the back and cut off the Great Lord's wrist to save Wenli's sizzle. Due to the acceleration of the mechanical power source in the spine, a large amount of steam was released from the gaps in the spine, which happened to affect Miss Chun-Li, who was hiding behind him. There was also a deadly plague mixed in between the high temperature of the steam. The area covered by the steam was so large that Chun-Li could only retreat quickly. The arm that was slightly touched by the steam would immediately rot and fester, and black abscesses would grow. If the infection continued, it might even become gangrene. Chun-Li gritted her teeth and decisively cut off this piece of flesh. There was a large amount of steam in front of him. This way, Chun-Li was also separated. Wenli, who was caught in the hands of the great ghoul, was also in an unprecedented danger. A mere human actually has such great strength. Your companions are all very strange. If there is a chance, I really want to give all of you to Dr. Swelling for research. Through cell culture, I can obtain your essence over a long period of time and use it to strengthen my body. It would be a pity to eat you directly. However, a large number of humans are currently invading my territory, so I don't have time to slowly deal with you. He clenched his arms with all his might. The great ghoul's arms combined with the mechanical structure of the gears between the muscles far surpassed that of humans, even with Wen Li's natural strength. It was difficult for her to find the right fulcrum to exert strength in such a huge hand. She couldn't break free. Ah, it hurts. Wen Li tried her best to support herself with her muscles to protect her body from being crushed. However, under the strong grip, her muscle fibers kept breaking. The pain from her muscle cells made Wen Li unable to help but cry out, and her body began to tremble. If this continued, Wen Li would end up with the tragic fate of having all her bones crushed. She would become a human-shaped food that was easy to digest. Lord, don't kill such a good embryo so easily. Extracting her muscle cells can effectively strengthen your ghoul army. At this time, Dr. Swelling's lower body wriggled over. The Great Lord looked at the doctor with a puzzled expression. No, the doctor's underground area has been threatened by a large number of intruders, and the elevator is damaged. It's impossible for them to come here. The Great Lord's brain was abnormally clear due to the long-term injection of fresh brain fluid. With only a second of hesitation, he directly stepped on Dr. Swelling's head. How smart! The disguise was removed. See through. Han Dong quickly turned sideways to avoid the step. With the Great Lord's white bone interlayer as a fulcrum, he quickly climbed up. He came to the Great Lord's head and looked directly at it. Yes! Staring at the little magic eye on Han Dong's forehead, the Great Lord actually had an instinctive sense of danger. He automatically retreated and focused most of his attention on Han Dong. Especially this eye, there was a feeling that it would be contaminated. At the same time, Han Dong turned sideways and found the gap in the Great Lord's right arm that was not covered by the white bones. The metal claws fused with the plague doctor's dagger forcefully tore open the skin. A type of super-infectious fungus activated by the G-virus invaded the wound. These modified fungi were different from ordinary fungi. They immediately destroyed the Great Lord's right arm. This greatly weakened the strength of the grip. Wen Li also took the opportunity to use all her strength to break free from the restraints and landed steadily on the ground. Words of gratitude were last. Wen Li would never let go of the opportunity that Han Dong had given her. She held the hammer in her hand and aimed at the calf area that was no longer protected by the white bones. Clang! The crisp sound of metal echoed. A small dent was made in the metal protective layer inside the calf, but it still could not be broken. Although Wen Li did not have much combat experience, her forging experience was very rich. Wen Li had a unique way to deal with this kind of metal. She took out a special flint used for forging and fixed it on the metal protective layer with one hand. Like forging a weapon, she heavily hit the surface of the flint with the hammer. Clang! Sparks flew. The metal protective layer around the calf area was completely shattered. The internal bones, nerves, muscle tissue, and blood vessels were all destroyed and evaporated by the high temperature released by the striking of the flint. The Great Lord did not have any chance to regenerate. Its huge body fell down with a loud bang. Chapter 256. The High Lord's right calf was completely broken. Just as its gigantic body was about to fall, sizzle, the pores on the High Lord's body expanded, releasing the steam accumulated in the mechanical devices in its body during the battle. Naturally, it also carried a deadly plague. Han Dong shouted, "Wen Li! Get out of the way!" Even if Wen Li's skin could withstand the high temperature, such high-temperature steam could not only carry a deadly plague but also contaminate the body. Once the steam came into contact with the skin, the plague would invade under the skin. Once it entered the blood vessels and spread in the body, the corresponding contamination would also affect the whole body. Wen Li's life would be in danger. Sizzle. The high-temperature steam was released with the High Lord as the center. Wen Li successfully retreated. However, outside the steam-covered area, Han Dong's figure was nowhere to be seen. In the steam mixed with black spores, spores are different from ordinary biological cells. They will not completely lose their enzyme activity due to high temperature. The highest temperature tolerance can reach 120 degrees Celsius. Han Dong had no intention of retreating at all. The High Lord's calf was completely destroyed. Even its regeneration was sealed by Wen Li's flint. Its mobility was greatly reduced. Such a great opportunity must not be wasted. He used the bird beak doctor costume to resist the high temperature. As for the black spores in the steam, Han Dong could turn them into plague energy for his own use. Han Dong could not be too restricted in such a plague steam environment. As long as he did not burn his skin, he would be fine. Who knew? Seeing that it was about to fall to the ground due to its loss of balance, the High Lord used its arms and other leg to support its body at the last moment and forcefully stabilized its body. Asterisk click, 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 asterisk. The gears in its spine were operating at high speed. Then, something unexpected happened. The right leg was broken. With the release of steam, something seemed to be wriggling in the wound. Asterisk swoosh. Asterisk. A series of tentacles grew out. These were mechanical tentacles with a metal cover and embedded with a gear structure. About 7 tentacles grew out of the wound to replace the broken calf and completely stabilize the falling body. When he saw this scene, Han Dong immediately made guesses and deductions. The High Lord lived in the early 19th century, so it was impossible for him to have such mechanical skills. The modification of his body must have been done after he became a ghoul, which was after the Dark Age descended. I didn't hear anything about it from Professor Swollen, nor did I find any experimental data that mentioned the problem of Great Lord modification. This meant that the High Lord's body modification had nothing to do with Dr. Swelling or the Manor's scientific research. In that case, could the intricate mechanical craftsmanship, the embedded unknown metal, and the exquisite engravings in the Grand Lord's body come from the old king he served? Due to the long-term service and the offering of sacrifices, they received corresponding rewards. How troublesome! When the Great Lord regained its footing, it immediately noticed Han Dong, who was not affected by the steam plague. You're not afraid of the steam plague? The eye on your head comes from a higher being. Could it be that you're like me, a human serving a king? No. I'm different from you. You're a dog and I'm a self-taught genius. I've never served anyone. The Great Lord was not angry at Han Dong's provocation. Instead, it was unusually excited. You've never served a king? That's great. If I kill you, I won't have any worries. If I can completely devour you, I might be able to turn your eye into my possession. At that time, I'll complete my promotion and become a hybrid demon. After it finished speaking, the Great Lord showed a cruel and fierce expression. It extended its right arm, flicked its sharp claws, and suddenly clawed at Han Dong's body. It intended to tear Han Dong's body into pieces, leaving only the head that carried the eye. However, facing the incoming giant arm and terrifying sharp claws, Han Dong had no intention of dodging. He actually chose to straighten his right arm with the GI and take it head-on. See through. At the critical moment, Han Dong decisively made his move. He reached out and firmly grabbed the sharp claws, using the G-virus to stimulate the potential of his arm to forcefully resist. Boom! Han Dong retreated about 2 meters and took the Great Lord's claw attack head-on. A large amount of steam has been released. Your internal power is somewhat insufficient, right? Han Dong smiled. A high-level plague had been released. It went along the sharp claws and reached the inner area of the Great Lord's finger. Han Dong grabbed the sharp claws and pulled them out with force. Whoosh! The 1-meter-long black claws were pulled out by Han Dong. It was so painful that the Great Lord's body trembled, and he let out a painful cry. At the same time, a burning iron chain shot from the outside of the steam and wrapped around the Great Lord's finger, burning the wound. Togu rushed over. His internal organs were injured, But Togu still had no intention of stopping. Instead, he showed a hearty smile because of the pain. His whole body was covered in lava, so he was naturally not afraid of the plague steam. Once the spores got close to Togu's body, they would be burned. Togu, take out all your strength and suppress him. Okay. With a full outbreak, every step Togu took left a lava footprint on the ground. He threw the iron chain with all his strength. The iron chain that was thrown out was like a sharp weapon. It directly penetrated the Great Lord's unprotected finger and went deep into the knuckle. Deep burning, the high temperature of the lava spread inside his body. Even with the protection of the metal layer, it was still painful. Togu also used both hands to pull the iron chain that had completely penetrated the Great Lord's body. Through the effects of strength and pain, he temporarily suppressed the Great Lord. This caused the Great Lord to maintain his bent posture with his arms stretched forward. Han Dong took the opportunity to circle behind the Great Lord and climbed up the back of his neck along the metal spine. His right hand gently pressed against the back of the Great Lord's head, squeak, squeak, squeak. To deal with such a body that resembled a giant, a 1-meter-long tentacle grew out of Han Dong's palm and penetrated the skull. The speckled tentacle could penetrate any material, even the metal layer that protected the brain was no exception. It wrapped around and went deep into the cerebral layer. For a moment, the Great Lord's two soybean-like pupils shrank further and became completely lifeless. Dozier Crow! Han Dong shouted at the top of his voice. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The Dozier Crow's voice came from the side. It seemed to have completed its mission. The steam dispersed. Wenli, let's hurry up and drag the Great Lord over. Han Dong and Togu cooperated with Wenli. They used all their strength to drag the absent-minded Great Lord toward the wall where the Dozier Crow was. Boom! They touched the secret compartment in the wall. The wall moved and revealed a pipe that could accommodate the Great Lord's giant mother body. It was a passage for transportation. Han Dong stood at the entrance of the pipe and shouted again, Mia? After a while, a response came from the bottom of the pipe, Hurry up! I can't hold on for long here. I've already extended the mother body's hibernation time as much as possible. It will wake up in at most 5 minutes. Okay. Everyone worked together to push the Great Lord into this transmission pipe. There was still one last step to the plan. Chapter 257. Actually, Han Dong actually had a chance to kill the Great Lord when he made contact with the back of the head. But the Great Lord could not die. Based on the information Han Dong had gathered so far, even if the Knight Regiment had set Lord Stuart as the final boss of this training, he would still be able to defeat it. That did not mean that the true master of the manor was him. In Han Dong's view, the true master of this place was the mysterious mother in the nest. And the Great Lord was essentially just an important spouse of the mother. The reason why the Great Lord needed large amounts of medicine every day to support its weak body was because of its reproduction. Once Han Dong killed the Great Lord, there was a high chance that the mother would be enraged. Following this, 2 things could happen. First, Mother Berserk. The Behemoth Knights will start a shared mission for the entire team, requiring everyone to work together to kill the mother and purify the manor. Second, a Knight's disposal. The Knights will directly intervene to deal with the mother and end the training. Either way, it was disadvantageous for Han Dong, who wanted to steal the deed. Han Dong needed to successfully steal the deed before the training ended without disturbing the mother. In addition, Han Dong's current tentacles did not allow him to directly obtain memories from the Great Lord's head. The only thing that Han Dong could do was make the Great Lord fall into a period of stagnation. This period of stagnation was very important. Their vision changed. A team led by the tank warrior Johnny. Holding the map that Han Dong had given them, they followed Han Dong's instructions and went through the hidden passageway on the first floor of the ancient castle to reach the core area of the ghoul factory. Because Han Dong had already informed Dr. Swollen, Johnny and Johnny were unhindered. Johnny and the others were unimpeded along the way. Only a few ghouls came out to disturb them as a sign of respect. Following the route that Han Dong had marked out on the map, Johnny's team continued to advance through the hidden passageway and finally arrived at a wide hall. 8 load-bearing stone pillars and skull candles were used for illumination. A giant stone throne was set up in the center of the hall. Some of the stone pillars were badly damaged, and the walls still had human silhouettes. Broken stones were scattered all over the ground. It was as if a battle had taken place here. Johnny scanned the spacious main hall. Didn't the freshman say that there would be a senior cadre here? Michelle, can you sense his presence? The beast-eared girl shook her head. She had already activated her Eye of the Beast, but she couldn't capture any living creatures. She squatted down and reached out to touch the scattered stones on the ground. That's strange. This hall seems to have been built not long ago, and these traces of fighting also seem to be man-made, deliberately arranged to look like a scene after a fierce battle. What does that brat mean? At this moment, coo coo coo, the parrot hanging on the waist of the beast-eared girl kept chirping, conveying the danger signal. Boom! The giant stone wall mechanism at the side of the hall automatically activated. The interior corresponded to a huge fleshy passage. It should be the senior cadre that the brat mentioned. Prepare for battle. If we can kill an important member of the ghoul nest, we'll definitely earn a lot of points. Johnny took his strongest defensive stance and was prepared to take a beating in advance, creating the best space for his teammates to attack. The parrot hanging on his waist kept chirping. The beast-eared girl, Michelle, felt that something was wrong. Captain, be careful. Once we notice that something is wrong, we'll retreat immediately. Okay. The sound of a huge object sliding and rubbing came from the fleshy passage. A gigantic ghoul slid out of the passage steadily and landed in the main hall. The stone wall mechanism activated to hide the passage. If one looked closely at the ghoul, they would realize that its spine was completely made of metal. Johnny was shocked. What a huge ghoul! It must be the commander of this underground lair. Everyone, prepare for battle. At the same time, the time of the consciousness disturbance ended. The Great Lord's pupils returned to normal, and he gradually regained consciousness. Why was my consciousness interrupted just now? What did that brat do? Anger. The burning pain from his fingers, and the mechanical tentacles that replaced his calf. He hadn't been injured so badly in a long time. The main hall hadn't changed, and even the shattered stone pillars and walls were the same. The Great Lord didn't suspect anything. At the same time, the 4 familiar intruders attracted most of the Great Lord's attention. Their armor, cloak, and equipment were all the same. But these 4 intruders felt a little different. However, because his consciousness was still a little blurry, and his injuries were more serious and he was angry, the Great Lord only wanted to clean up the intruders as soon as possible. Just as the 2 sides were about to fight, a third person arrived. Dr. Swollen wriggled the tentacles on his lower body and rushed here. His face was full of fear, and his hands were holding his head that was constantly swelling due to nervousness. Great Lord, this is bad. My detection device has sent an alarm. Your treasury seems to have been invaded. Although the doctor had made mistakes, he had put a lot of effort into the manor, and built the ghoul factory himself. He was deeply trusted by the Great Lord. And this time, it was Dr. Swollen himself who had rushed here. In retrospect, the Great Lord had indeed entered a period of stagnation. This is bad. Land deed. The land deed was more important than the Great Lord's life. If he really lost it, he would fall into an endless abyss and would never be able to climb back up. Regardless of whether what Dr. Swollen said was true or false, he had to personally confirm the issue of the land deed. Doctor, you have to temporarily block these intruders at all costs. I want to confirm whether the treasury has been invaded, as well as the issue of the land deed. Yes, sir, quickly confirm it. The land deed cannot be lost. The great lord ran at his fastest speed towards the stone seat in the center of the main hall. He extended his hand to touch the hidden button inside the armrest, trying to open the hidden passage to the treasury. Dr. Swollen naturally witnessed the entire process, and he touched the position of the switch and memorized it in his heart. At the same time, the doctor arrived in front of Johnny's small group. Staring at Dr. Swollen, whose aura was not weak at all, Johnny's group of 4 was on full alert. Because they were facing 2 high-level existences at the same time, the small group even had the intention to retreat. Who knew that the situation would suddenly change? When Dr. Swollen arrived in front of them, he did not have the slightest hostility. Instead, he revealed a kind smile and said, "Long live Lord Nicholas." Johnny and the rest were stunned. What was this situation? The professor continued, "All of you must help Lord Nicholas stall the Great Overlord." "This is Stuart's Great Lord?" Johnny stared at the great ghoul that was fiddling with the stone seat and took 2 steps back in fright. "Don't worry, the Great Lord is already injured, and I will also send the ghoul army to support you." After Dr. Swollen gave his instructions, he immediately went through the transmission passage on the other side to the real main hall of the ancient castle, and told Han Dong about the information of the treasury's switch. Once the doctor left, a large number of ghouls rushed into the fake main hall, and together with Johnny and the rest, they stared at the great Lord of Stuart, who had not been able to open the secret passage to the treasury. "What's going on?" Looking around at the ghoul army that was assisting their group, staring at the big boss of the group training that had suddenly slid here, recalling how Dr. Swollen had called him Lord Nicholas, everyone was stunned. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.